Okay, we're live here. Started off the fine-tuned pitch of the 440. Okay, so what is today's topic? Today's topic, and I might as well post up here so that you can read it while we discuss it or I discuss it. Um, and this will be the topic of mass shooting once again. This is relating to the topic on should you be able to continuously count the dead in a mass shooting situation? Obviously, let's not go straight to the point right now, but that is the number one agile word. Should you be able to continuously count the dead in a mass shooting? Should you be able to count anything you want to count? So let me post it up here, the questions here. I'm going to go through each and every topic and we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, it does not get censored. None of the other ones had gotten censored at all, so should be fine there. So let's go ahead and look at the topics here. So we have room, which is should you be able to perceive mass shootings in a different way than you're normally used to have endorsed the idea as fragile as it is, even though you might have a national security level that says, hey, you can have no victimization in the United States, you can have no crime. That's kind of the restitution we have and hold through our Constitution and our rights, human rights, and things like that. You might say the national security laws, prevent any misfortune from going on, and I think a lot of people would agree. A lot of people would also agree. Certain laws have no effect to alien, and one of those things is like let's say you're a federal agent, you get insurance, and it relates to your job as a federal agent. That gives you liability, and also you're already protected from certain classes while you're in that federal job for certain things. So if you're responsible for shooting an attacker during a mass casualty, it's there for you to keep you safe. Doesn't mean you go frenzy or go crazy about it, but when you take care of your job for the benefit of people, it helps. But what if you're lost in between? What if you're a victim who gets in between something? And I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying the reality of it is highly likely, right? So I mean, the same as you doing drugs, stopping somebody using drugs. The system is repetitive. You're looking at something that doesn't really make sense to you, and oftentimes you might go through the looking glass, so to speak. And I mean, some places it might not be, but some places it might be harder to stop something problematic, and oftentimes it might relate towards the reality of you being on the same level as somebody with federal ability. And no one's saying yeah or no to that situation, but there's a classification there. One insurance versus the other. Most liability insurance do not cover any security clearance whatsoever, and that's just a basic thing. You would need an endorsement from a job, and that's just kind of the final answer to that. So these questions don't poke holes in anything. They go around the idea of why is there already an issue perceiving, you're relating information. And most of the time usually it's the framework. Usually if it's an item for an item or a perception of business, usually business owners are responsible in that fashion, or they can be reported by a consumer or something like that, or another business. And just that's how fair businesses work. But a lot of the time, such as liability, such as furthering certain things like education, a lot, there's no way to really make a report. There's only like one business. It's kind of like reporting the BBB, even though it has a corrupt perception. The difficulty there is finding a way to report it, which is generally just difficult. It's disqualifying for you or your business. It looks bad. You look like you have a rounded I wouldn't say rounded talk, but you have a different dimension to you, in which someone like the BBB might say, "Oh no, we're a good business. They're just kind of bad at what they do." You can perceive it differently. You could say one thing is another, but usually it's not the case. So let's go into the setting here of the question. Fundamentally, there's a few more questions to go into and kind of relate on a similar topic, which are quick to the hand, quick to the, whatever measure you need to make, quick to that. And then also the surgical aspect, or the second line, which is you're the walking, you're the assistant, you're the apprentice, you're the intern. You're just a regular bystander, citizen, and you're standing by. What can you do in this situation? But also what are your related options in this situation? That's the bigger factor, because without that bigger factor, you don't have the priority of anything, right? Just kind of like the liability we're talking about, right? You have a fundamental right to do something, but you don't have the fundamental right to access like things like people's information, life-saving devices the government may have, or in the instance of liability itself, or restitution. I mean, there's plenty of things that a normal citizen won't have, but elected figures are able to hire certain people to do certain jobs, or hire outside contractors, which usually they don't do the job. Take example, Facebook. Take example, MySpace back then. Maybe not, but the relationship there shows if you're not responsible for some of these ethical things, like mass shooters, victimization, and I'm not trying to be pulling apart the story, but the relationship there is, once you find a way to victimize somebody, it can often lead to frustration that can grow. They might not comprehend or understand that, and somebody else might take advantage of that moment, or somebody else might be caught up in very simply drugs, things like that, and it kind of snowballs into this effect that goes into a lot of in-depth problems. And I mean, anyone could maybe have those problems, and there's not a problem asking those questions. Sometimes it is. Sometimes there's a problem asking those questions altogether. It's kind of like asking your camp counselor, can you be the friend all the time? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, and I'll say at the start, but the wrong problem is that like you're getting off on the wrong foot, right? There's technology to make about anything in the world, but you just have to find your own niche or your own idea behind it. And idea is a very formal or open word. I mean, it can be used in many ways. I mean, you can be a creator, you can do a lot of things, but it doesn't have to be all based on improvement. And that's, I kind of went over that a while ago, but the DIY, or the aspect of the quick fix, right? We're kind of going into the quick, novice here, which is kind of the choice ethic. It's a dilemma. If you can, be with friends and family, you have a reason to suspend all faith. And I think, a lot of the time you don't think about the focus. And I think the quality of life is concerning to most people who don't have that issue. As we spend money, you have to go on, a dilemma itself, and then time. But you'll kind of find, a lot of these things are connected. You're going from a spectrum of sharing a lot, and I mean the dependability is good if it's secure. I think, but overall, usually that is a harder one to break. That's a cultural revelation right there. Social ethic, it's as well as big. But trying to fit into a cultural need that can be a social aspect as well. So the relationship there, it's fully your choice, but it's also a revelation. You might find will help you overall throughout life, right? So I mean, family is one thing, but operationally, most of the government, most of the laws, work and surround those things, unless there's some sort of formal choice behind it. It's usually the case, but the outstanding or outside facts, sometimes are succumbative, sometimes they're rational in certain ways, for reasons. I mean, people can get better, people can, suffice to say, find meaning in life. Beyond that meaning, I mean, you're absolutely finding something new to do with your life that is good. But not most people can do that. I mean, you would be basically brought to institutions, as well as like prisons, as they say it, where you're finding, a 4 to 9 job, 4 in the morning to 9 at night kind of job. You're working sparingly, you're working then, there, now. So the ethic isn't really principle driven. I mean, certain places, ethic is a big thing. We'll say, I mean, the farm to table kind of outlook or movement says that, but I mean, not everybody's the same way. If the organizer of that was truly a bad guy, or truly had done somebody wrong, then I think just not that one person would disagree, but a lot of people would disagree with the overall management, operation, policy, and there's nothing wrong with that. So let's kind of go into the representation of this question. A few of the other questions, had to touch on God, had to touch on the revelation of driving, if you're a victim. Some of them had to do with equality of life, concerns like teeth. Some of them, or another one, had to do with the court's remembrance. Should they be able to not victimize you but forget about your relationship? And I mean, this could go from one person to the other, or they can play catch up, right? So I mean, every system you might look at, and you kind of look at Mark Twain when you look at that, and it's no fool to read Mark Twain even as an adult. You're looking at the relationship between certainty and then certain points in time, right? There's no catching point. I mean, these ideas obstruct purpose. They came around when the digital age came around. Even the Nazis didn't have enough technology, and that's a breathing point for a lot of people, right? I mean, just because you can put yourself on a piece of paper doesn't necessarily mean that it's obstructive, right? It's about the moment. It's about the work you're doing with that paper that really puts it. Your idea is safe no matter what, right? But the problem you have when it comes to design ethics, or a lot of them, is you're sharing a relationship with things that are not secure anymore as they used to be. um, and that's a bigger thing, kind of like when they invented steam power, they didn't really have a need for gasoline before that. They were just kind of self-driven by coal, which is a kind of a self-purpose. I mean, they might say gasoline was invented one time, but they might say at the same time the Indians used it for such and such, like tanning, or things for animal fur, or making steel, things like that. But relationship over time, it changes, right? I mean, you can see that there were more waste spins after the invention of gasoline than beforehand. So there is that. The point is kind of questionable, right? You're decreasing something called certainty. It's a different language, I suppose, back then. But I'm not really going to go into that today. So the relationship does share some sort of need for filling out the blank, or fixing things in a certain way. So let's go on to the other questions here. Dry eyes right now, I guess. So we asked the question, would you be able to continuously count the dead in a mass shooting? That should probably be no. I mean, it depends on how much invaluable time you had, or valuable time you had. It might seem like that because it is a dilemma. It's a high crisis environment. You're in a situation that will just disappear in a second, that will go away in a second, and it will flash into infinity, like kind of a song is playing in the back of your mind. But the reality of finding a central purpose is obviously the mastermind of the question. Why don't they show up and save this issue? If you know about so much of this, or why are you so obstructive for police chief? Why are you so unreasonable for a researcher? Why are you so disciplined for an academic teacher? And you have so much money, and you don't share, right? So I mean, a lot of the purpose goes into that. I mean, you're looking at a person, you're looking more than a person. You're looking what could have changed their life in a second. You are the doctor when you put your eyes on that person, kind of you're left at a situation kind of saying, yeah, I need to make this person live now. I'm sure of it, right? The other side questions your identity and says, do you have time? Do you have focus and purpose? And those are kind of direct purposes in a way. Certain books will adapt to that. It might be existential. It might be a modern figurative writing. It might be classicism, classist writing. Kind of like Dostoevsky is a little bit of classist, or there's a few other of them. They make fun of Marx, or different people. But what they say about classist writing is just like a German or a German soldier. Once you're in the closet, just the same as an American, you are sitting in the closet. There's no other way out. You have to find the way out, right? So the distribution, or the thinking, master critical thinking, whatever you want to call it, it's lost on Americans. It's lost on this idea of Western culture, which includes not Eastern as they put it. It's the West. It's the Pacific. It's the coastal. You're in a region that is not supportive of this technology at all. It is classist in most ways. But the policy is there to add whatever nothing you can add to it, and you'll have no problem at all. So That's a good way to put it. But you think, when you're looking at the outside world, you're looking at, someone who's a terrorist, someone who's a spy, someone who's, counterculture in a way. That ethic is time held. It's like tribal in a way. It's kind of like the little secret, but it's also the navigation point, right? So, if you can look at, the basic blocks of, California or, different places on the Pacific coast, it's primarily, some of the places are hurricane free, some of them, earthquake free, but, pretty much it holds together more than the other places. So, the supportive means to find, population. It grows here. So it grows. So there's more choice in the matter. Without choice, there's hesitation. There's the question of revelation. A lot of things that don't really cooperate. Or I'm sorry, cooperate together. They're kind of forbidden. The questions about, like, alarming the system. That's just not language you would use other places. So, when you're counting the dead in the mesh, it wouldn't really matter, right? I mean, it would matter that you're counting, but I mean, when you were within the sense of your own range, I mean, you were secure. It's not like picking up rocks and asking yourself, I'm picking up 1 rock, 2 rock, 3 rock, 5 rock, right? You're counting not with your fingers, you're kind of with every little muscle in your body of what is, talking to you, what is breaking down the communications, what is, what is you're looking for. And it's classist in a way, but it furthers the justice, kind of like, in Fahrenheit 451. It's your identity that is your own introduction to, your value in a way. As a support system, yeah. You're when you're learning to lean into the communication of, mass technology, mass media, or mass chaos, the casualty point isn't a question mark. It's not an explanation mark. It is an explanation mark some way, but you are professionally putting out a crime that will no longer exist. You are putting that in a conversation. It's becoming more and more now that people have caught on to it. Mass media is a piece of art. It is no longer, just a capability of homeland security, of criminal justice. It's a professional art. The technology behind it is obviously questionable because it's not very pertain to money, and same as homeland security. All these things are arranged in certain ways, just kind of like the clockwork or the arrangement, in horror stories. A lot of these things aren't caught on, but they're keeps, right? So, like, when you look at the scene and theme of today's, natural world order, you don't really see Stephen King. You see, Kirk Breyer's novel about the Clockwork Orange. You see, people are eating less and less food. They're depending on less and less meats. They're depending on much more, things like pornography, much more exercise, much more of a lot of things are like not talking to people or being classist in a way. You're achieving, a frightened goal, kind of like Dostoevsky would say, and like, crime is punishment, but you're creating a blank page at the same time, or a blank stage. It's a Brighton Point, kind of like, Dollhouse would go into in that play. You're reinventing something that is like a choice, a novice reaction, an urged potential. And what you do learn is, you're hearing or you're seeing that someone has invented something important, like kind of like a light bulb, and it's difficult to process because you don't have a choice in the matter, even though it's hurting you, like, some sort of potential, right? So, when you get to these points in Revelations, your adoption, and we're going to go into a little bit of this today. I kind of, put a little of this together, thinking about, liability insurance as well. Some of those things are not grouped together specifically for something like this, and it is truly a daunting point, as most liability insurance will not cover something like this. You'll fall asleep listening to hours and hours of this conversation saying, oh, even the private lawyer from, I don't want to say its name, but it's an attorney driven. It's only one, like I was mentioning before, that does actual, self-defense in all 50 states. But, liably, they'll say one thing versus, get the other, and they may make you read the, hour-long thing, but it will cost you a lot of money. Someone who is college age, someone who's mom, dad, someone who's a federal agent would not simply not have that money. It just wouldn't work any other. Even in the military, you would just not have the money for these things. If you're looking at money, look at the freedom of information, the freedom of technology. And it's not a bad word. It's not a cuss word. You're looking at the relationship between your data, and you're looking at the relationship of security. It's bringing apart from the sensation or positivity or effectiveness of finding a way to hide something, in a novice choice. It's somebody's choice, basically. You're putting a use to something that already has a use, right? So if it came to like 1 gigabyte of data or gigahertz, you're looking at the newest choice of, wireless technology, freedom of choice, things like that, technology that can be used in certain ways. And obviously it's bad for you. Is vibration, radiation bad for you? Yes, but the choice is, making it stronger, right? That's the bigger thing. Even if it is a cable away, it needs to be stronger for your choice so you can have that cable safely. So, instead of going down, and asking yourself, should I go down to the arsenic mines today and go mine for, mercury, or should I go and, do something, unknown, right? You should really find a way to do something safely. There's a choice in the matter, right? You should find a way to do something safely. Obviously, science has evolved, but the question is, would you spend billions of dollars to go to space? Or would you find like, billions of dollars to kind of like find a frustration free environment? I mean, save your life now and like, put a 5 year, plus sign on your life, or, kind of take it down two years every day, or 2 years, like, every time you kind of do that. And when those 2 days, I mean, you don't really count against your life. I mean, when more people count against your life, you're learning about recurring issue, right? It's not, it's one out of the other, right? You're down in luck. He went to space. He's going to kind of win a little bit more money. Not really. It's always changeable. It's just money. So it's not like it's change, like, but like, if you used a bunch of like, steel for needles and started recycling those in an inappropriate way. Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, think collectively, right? If you don't have collective information, you probably can't use it, or need it, right? So that's another bigger question. All right, so we kind of went over, kind of basic thing of the, counting the dead. And the reaction there is, stay sane, right? Stay safe. Basically, you're seeing a basic thing. I mean, you could break it down as many times as you want, and you could crack the puzzle as many times as you want, but somebody might be on top at all times. I mean, whether it's karma, whether it's, nature that does it, the self-revolving door is always there. Bad is good nowadays, right? So, the probability is like, you are within a consumer choice, and the fragile structure is like, everything you're trying to break down, you're trying to break even at. So that's the bigger choice, not the meat bun, not the your relationship between, giving it your all and giving it your none, right? You're finding a way to kind of stay, neutral, safe. Now, if that means talking to your neighbor, that means, talking to your ex classmate, your clutch friend. I mean, these are all normal thoughts a normal person would have nowadays. You not reaching out to a friend who has these issues is so serious. It's crazy. I think a normal person in any situation would be asking yourself, if you don't know how to crack the puzzle yet, I mean, you need to start looking at, some ideas beyond, what you're looking at, because clearly I think somebody would have concerns with this relationship or reality, because it's, whether you like it or not, it's very serious in nature. Just because you have no idea what's going on in the world doesn't mean somebody else isn't there or has an idea. But you got to understand there's a relationship there. Because of that relationship, things are usually more serious in that impact or what's going on than you just don't notice, right? It can be serious and you would not know it for 50 years, but you're not in the 1950s. You're not in the 1920s. There's computers nowadays. You have to take yourself out of this mindset of forgiving or forgetting and pretending, if that's what you want to call it. But the relationship there is, it's not normal to print, death certificates and say, I faked my death. It's not normal. It's crazy. Basically, it's crazy to say like one thing versus the other nowadays because of how hysterical, or how it's not even the same word as what I was saying, but how crazy things are. It's beyond the basic building blocks of the mainframe, melting down. You're looking at systematic overthrow. That's Nazi. That's murderous. You know, That's when you underline the murder and you know that something extreme is going on. Beyond that, you were looking at basic building blocks again. But the novice, there is the choice. You were collectively already understanding. You have been brought up to relate to information that is to keep you safe, your family safe, and to keep you in a normal range or understanding with others. And that is to stay protected. That is to stay in a clause all by itself. So, I mean, it doesn't mean much beyond that, but it doesn't mean you are in sensibility that you can break from anything you want. You just have to find a way. So that's the bigger importance. I mean, you raise your hand, say, I swear by God's oath that the triangle and the square are the same. But, 4 to 5 times, you might say, hey, let live, right? It's always about your safekeeping, right? Never do somebody wrong. That doesn't mean to get involved with you in an instinct that is beyond the revelation. And some of that's like Plato, some of that's Aristotle, right? So let's go into the next questions here. So if I was or if I had a BA in psychology, it's kind of like me, and I experienced a mass murder and had all my rights taken away, and a group of people started pushing nonsense to try to arrest me, would caseworker insurance be the only thing that could get me out of liability of that issue or any pretend issue in the future? Well, I asked Google. It says no. Pretty much not. An actual attorney, DUI attorney, or I'm sorry, just an attorney would probably be the one to ask that question. You're like, kind of lower the tone. So the reality there is, then yeah, if you were a caseworker and you're fully rotating, I'm not sure about the money, but the quality of the artifact, the idea about the insurance of the engagement is the serious tone in nature. If it is all to be real and unreal. So in a hypothetical situation, right? But the reality of something, let's say freedom of speech, do you think or do you believe that is the same? And you'll say yeah and no. The relationship does surround any writing, any publishing, any research, any document, but you would have to be sued for that exact reason or meaning. So you're kind of in a frenzy. People forget, people take away. And then one thing you do know about laboring or practicing maybe mass murder gangs, relationships between cults, militias, one of them is that they hurt you and then they leave. That's the modern technique. That's what they always do. That is the tribal sense in which they've agreed with. There's other techniques they have besides pushing you in and throwing you out. But the question is, if you as a psychologist or you as somebody seeking liability for, let's say, any of the upper choices here of caseworker, which you practically need a BA for, and one of the top ones, psychology, sociology, social work, and then the relationship of that, or like a tech, a behavioral tech, or something like that. Yeah, I know it's similar. Yeah, I know it's different, but the relationship, not a rush. It's you're sharing an interest there with the same strategy. I mean, you might be collectively a vocational rehabilitation counselor, and you might be relating choice versus a matter of just kind of being helpful in a way. Be assertive a little bit like a parent would be. Be normal, but the relationship there should always be broken down, and that's the bigger point, right? So breaking things down, might seem square, it might be seem circle, it might be obscure, it might be strange, it might be valuable. I mean, at the same time, you might say, that is technological, right? But the breaking down of this maybe future tense point, or this relationship of breaking things down, or pushing away, hardship. Who is left for that? Private eye is left for that. A police officer. There's a lot of blanks there. Even as a person on the outside world, can you select yourself to be a police officer? Not really. A case manager? Yeah, that's probably caseworker, case manager. That's usually pretty much basic job. That's the like entrance level for security clearance, for like reading people's papers and things like that. Otherwise, like you're up to polls, communication ethics and politics, reading polls and reading a phone number, maybe a first name, maybe a last name. Going by a script, that's about it. I mean, same for computer store, things like that, or computer tech. That's about it. So when you look at the relationship there, I mean, you're owning a business. Not really security clearance. I mean, when you ask yourself, you have to pretend something that isn't going to push you away, push you out of something. And just like, the Nazis, went and, did people in. But, this revelation of the story, what is it called? Solids. They did the same thing after, the Nazis took out and, they pushed them into this kind of region, which theoretically is Belarus. And there'll be some international disagreement there. Because of certain values, when those are Christian as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of choices and questions. Are Christians are just the same as that in America, right? I mean, you push away, you push forward, you push to a past tense and a sense, right? So, it's a way to create disorder and order at the same time. It might be select reasoning, as like anyone in any culture can just kind of find, but the relationship there is also. It's so important. I mean, you would forget to do something else. So, I mean, as a teacher, we can get insurance as a teacher, but I mean, you're sharing the relationship with something else. Caseworker, you can work at FBI, you can work at the CIA, you can work at many places that hold security clearance. But would a caseworker, just simply be the novice choice? Do they have a technology reason to create choice? Not really. I mean, you have liability at certain points, but the liability would be covered and most likely under the distinguishment of the workplace itself that makes so much money, right? So because the money doesn't just interact usually. I mean, you could put a piece of paper on a piece of paper, it still won't interact. The relationship there isn't really a choice. I mean, basic measures. You were counting against counting. You're using your hands to count, measure, kind of like sign language. So relationship might extend to a pencil or pen or paper, but the case for this is kind of like a case for like getting a child's driver's license for a kid, or as an adult or something like that, as a joke. And more in sincere way, more less in sincere way, but the relationship there is kind of like you're looking at a novice point, kind of like looking at the federal perpetration list for sexual offenders, the jurisdiction list, or like looking at your state and city crime base. You're looking at low level crimes basically on every count except sexual predator relationships. You're not looking at bank robberies. I mean, say you committed bank robbery in Florida and you end up in Texas or New York after like 15 years. It's going to show up on the Florida record. So I mean, there's no system that interchanges everything. So you working as a caseworker is one step in a direction to kind of like look at it. It's kind of like the system has been tricked, and you're kind of getting a job now, or you're finding a relationship between that, or finding a way to maybe fix the system altogether. But that supportive meaning or need is just as serious as in any country in the world, and you're competing in a market now. So you're really looking at the state level, the mass shooting, awareness, or situationalism. That would look good for a caseworker no matter what. If you're looking at like that as your skill level, I think you can underline skill level versus the other idea of finding a brokerage or a limit for your case worker or management style or situation. It's a hard one to think about. You're looking at your selective, make your way to make things. So as a caseworker, do you usually make things? The same as an abject writer. If you're a writer who doesn't get paid and you have liability insurance, you're getting paid to make things. Copyright almost, or find a way to create publication laws or ethics behind it. It makes you more creative. It makes you more interesting as maybe a student or academic researcher. But the probability is that you're making a break for the case. I mean, you could easily be taken advantage of. You're spending money. Your liability is an earned interest for somebody else, meaning you're pertaining towards all the ideas that you're learning is now in their book. That's one of the reasons they're also able to sell the insurance. They're liquidated by another company or something, or they have a shareholder that wants some of your information, right? Whether you like it or not, but the liability there's you're getting money in exchange for something. So I mean, if you were to ask yourself, if you were going to get arrested, maybe it would be different, right? If you're going to get arrested, being a case manager, defending the idea of a social worker, I mean, the relationship there is on a network. I mean, if you're asking what counselors and therapists do, they go to associations, right? So you're asking yourself, like, why do you go into an association instead? I mean, they're expensive. It's just as much as getting this liability insurance for being a caseworker. It's like 70, maybe more than that money, $100 for a year, maybe for a new one. But I mean, the reality would it be needed? I mean, if you can't communicate, that's the bigger thing. If you can't communicate with another caseworker, that money is sparing, right? Liability, yeah, just to have a name out there. Why would you want your name out there as a caseworker? As an outspoken caseworker with what revelation? What real choice? And then the basic blocks of the novice, the choice is there again. That's a person right there, and he talked about what? I mean, said what, or like he has to bring up and testify for what, or like they have to find a way to do what. I mean, the choices go on there as a revelation of choice, fact, and there's plenty of questions, but is there a relationship? I mean, you'll say, yeah, like gun violence and cartels go together, but what if that question was denied? What if that question was saying, like, saying, oh, that's international versus national market, and everybody says the same. Oh, it's international versus national. It's Coke versus Pepsi. And you're kind of like, I think a little bit differently because I can see it, experience it. I see people, confused with the conflict, and they don't really know what to do, and they turn their lives into something, they shouldn't believe in. Would you sue a caseworker for that? I mean, what would be the right, if a caseworker threw an empty water bottle at you and said, "Oh, he tried to attack me, arrest him," right? So, I mean, or like, they made up a story or something. The caseworker, would they win the challenge? If they fake, their death, or if they fake, the setting of their death, would it be different? Like, so there's some like, loopholes or relationships, as you can see, there's a topic, right? So you're finding a way a normal relationship would share with the environment. And no matter what, this normal environment is there, right? The other instances, somebody is going through so many stages of problems with, non-normal behavior. And I think you can relate it to non-normal behavior. On the other hand, you can relate, abnormal behavior as, crossing the situation in this reason of, you're kind of like not spurring of the moment. You're coming with a lot of reasons to do something that are negotiative, finding a way to figure something out, or find or share a relationship. And there's nothing wrong with buying time, I suppose, for your own safety. But when you find a relationship and it concludes with the ideas that are just not, normal, like you're finding a way to, strike the case, or to find a way to, make meaning behind something that could find less liability and more liability. It's a tricky question because perceptively, you wouldn't just say, "Hey, it cuts you out." You'd find a way, to find a relationship, and just slipping out your mind. I mean, a normal person would have no fear or fact against somebody having a relationship with normal behavior again and again and again. Again, it would just name it PTSD. It wouldn't just name it antisocial at that point. It would be criminal. It is. It's kind of like striking points. If every time you miss multiple times and it just keeps on getting worse, and it's like it's almost like like psyops in the military. They kind of finding a relationship between what is purposeful and what is now. It is somewhat difficult to find a relationship there. Well, I got to exit for 1 second. I'll be right back. Well, actually, let me see. Take a break feature. I've never heard of that. All right. Let's see. How to use the take a break feature on YouTube. I have mm, settings in the bottom. Break settings. Okay. Hmm. I don't know. Let's see. And this is difficult to find. I will just have to mute the computer, I guess. And then just kind of do it this way. Okay, so that's about the principle of my break at least. Let's go back into sharing the screen. But we were talking about the relationship between not looking up, looking down, or you're looking at a finite way to, or relative to you're finding a choice that is beyond the liability, what you would think as a caseworker or psychologist. And I would hope to get a PhD someday, right away, because of how earned this interest. It's stacking up, and you'll be very surprised once you go into your degree. Is that it's very basic and normalized as a degree setting. These hours are very important that you don't just kind of waste the time away. And I might seem smart, and somebody might say I'm smart, but relationship there is serious. So you might find an age gap as well. So as a human, obviously, some people go through certain things that it might become more real over time, not daunting or honest. It's a real thing that you have your body going through issues. I mean, it doesn't mean you're going to go die. It means that you're just kind of finding a way. Your body's hibernating. Certain your body's adjusting in a certain way, and it could be for many reasons. You could have held your chest differently. I mean, it's a big thing. And when you look at weight loss nowadays, of course your body is adapting differently at different ages and things like that. It's just a serious thing now. The regrowing teeth. I mean, so relationship there is huge in any choice or way you want to put it. So, when you are looking at the liability, you are thinking about something else the social worker or the caseworker is not thinking about beyond human relief, beyond, not just human relief, but beyond, the situation to make things more normal. And there's nothing wrong with saying normal. It's about saying, contingent, about finding a way to meet your needs in a way. I mean, a lot of caseworkers maybe don't have normalized, as they put it, relationships between English literature beyond certain things, TSL 1 or something like that. But a lot of these things were in fact normal in the 90s, the 80s, 70s, 60s, 40s. But modern relationships, it might have changed. The institutionalism might be the foreshadowed part, or the concrete, kind of like the Polish push away from Germany, or push away from Russia, things like that. So it's questionable, right? Because when you find a resource, you want to say, hey, that's the exact thing I need, which is belief in religion, belief in my satisfaction, but not always your limit, right? Your limit is about fitting in, and it does take some time to adjust. Sometimes, as like maybe it's not normal to spend not time with your family, or spend time with some sort of concurrent issue. And I could say probably a lot of people have had that issue, and I would hope so, that your parents had no idea, maybe a guardian, or and if it's not that, maybe it's just kind of a friend or something, and you're starting to kind of constipate, or I'm sorry, find a relationship between what you're trying to resurrect in a way, or find a way to help develop something. But the relationship you're sharing is hard for somebody to grasp sometimes, beyond this range of what we consider critical thinking. Consonate. So I think the reality there is, if you're finding a way to of developing a supportive network, you wouldn't really think away from the system. you shouldn't think away from the system. You shouldn't think away from the system at all. It's fragile. I'd say everything, for a caseworker or a social worker should be fragile. It should be even. It should be supportive. But again, the reality isn't that simple. It's not broken down that way. It's kind of like salt and pepper. It's kind of like baking soda and apples, right? Or baking soda and beef, right? I would say no to them, but the reality is some people like that idea. Some people have grown with this cultural need for maybe shocking or maybe something else, but certain people haven't. I mean, I'm maybe more adapted towards the Thanksgiving mind, and it doesn't mean I pick one religion versus the other or any at all. I show myself that there is a relationship between maybe good or thinking skills, or finding a relationship between points that are about pertaining liveliness. It might be good food, it might be good humor, it might be good nature itself, right? So finding a way to sustain a balance, maybe karma or something like that. So when you go to that situation, I mean, mostly I think somebody in casework or something like that would go and go into form, go in to talk to somebody. There is what they consider breathing point, or consider a way to stay within the heart, right? You're finding a way to manifest through exercise, repetition. There's many things you could do. So let's go to the next question, since that one is kind of it's supposed, right? And you're supposing the question, you're supposing the fact, but a lot of people can guess around it. They can say, hey, I believe you're kind of correct, right? I mean, you ignored this for that. You went down the list and said, hey, this is it. And then you kind of gave, let's say a fake ultimatum. You kind of like make a past tense of the choice, or the choice of as it is art, right? And the idea there is to find some sort of way to, sober someone up, but the relationship there is also you're not looking at sobriety anymore. You're looking at what is the relationship, the reaction time, the unadequate thinking, procedure, or what is the follow-up measure. And then if nothing happens, you're kind of showing, okay, it was, a caseworker, it was, case management, and also the theory is incorrect. So the relationship there, might share, certain distinctions, like kind of saying, hey, this distinction was, they were trying to communicate with each other. It was to protect, their class. It might be their habits, their thinking skill, just as one communication skill versus the other. You leave an object here. I wrote, a similar test for my psychology class. You're communicating as a way to find a form and a factor. You're finding a relationship to do things. Not just because you're throwing trash in the trash can, but you're finding a way to do something, which it's kind of like you're explaining, to do something in a way. So it does share, reaction, relationship, purpose, theory in itself already, sharing, some sort of coincidence, but it's also showing, you might be protected. You might be within a supportive mean to do something that needs help, working and saying, oh, I need help for this reason, right? You automatically presume, you just need help, right? Or, the other person did need help, but they don't need help now. Or you find a relationship between, why is this supportive and why is this, what they may consider policy? Why is this relationship not founded, right? That might be, this person can't walk, this person can't do certain things. The relationship there is, it's harder to, relate to sometimes. So there's that as well. But let's go on to the next question here. And let me put my power cord on so that I have all the storage memory on my computer. Let's see here. And it will take you time and time again to go and work this situation out. But I'm sure in the end you just have to find a revelation that is a safety net. I think that's the better important I've been watching True Blue forums on for Chris. I'm not promoting the metal, but I think it's the stake of somebody finding a way to model this in a sense is important. I think just like this lecture here, it shows this relationship between what's bad, what's evil, what pertains to kind of villainous behavior, but overall there are ways to relate why things don't work, why morally it is unacceptable. Yeah, but why as a relationship between the community and it continues to happen, continues to pertain. I mean, a mass scale, somebody controls your electronics. A mass scale, people decide who gets to work, right? So I mean, is a relationship, I mean, you wouldn't just go necessarily to work, but you would show this relationship between needs and a want, maybe, or want and why. I mean, if all the disappeared in the world related to serial killers, then it would be a different time. But people get mad at their parents. People get bitter. Sometimes they get even at people. So it's questionable sometimes. So let's go to the next question here. And if you haven't noticed, there's Lady Liberty in the background here. Shout out to her and what she can accomplish. It's a random courthouse here. So what insurance would be better suited? Publication insurance was once tried once before as self-defense. However, the ability to drive is still not allowed. We answered most of that question, I think, and that's kind of like the ones that we've answered before, as this relationship kind of stays conclusive. That's the word. But the ability to drive, again, we kind of went into the lawyer thing. There's not a lot of options here. You kind of want to get better. You want to be a secret agent. But if you're looking at federal work and say, like, you were lost in this idea and the federal agent didn't do anything, I would say, federal insurance would probably be number one. I wouldn't spend your money on an actualization lawyer, is like I would put it. Somebody who kind of dresses differently. But it's the same thing in a way. I mean, unless they're actually doing something differently, I mean, you'd have to look at the fine print, and they might say, "Oh, yeah, I have actualization insurance, and it's for attorney work or whatever." Do they do that? I mean, you'll have to look. I looked at some of the proof. There's only one of them in the country that says they did all of it. It doesn't look like they do all of it. So. They said things could change, state to state, but if they don't already say they will pertain to something that has already happened and that always will happen, what's the point? So I mean, looking at that and saying like, okay, they already said on a case by case basis they will not do that structure. And look at that. So you have an answer right there, black and white. So if you want to imagination and you want to say red, blue, and yellow or something, I mean, go all odds. But why doesn't it exist? Why? And that's another question. Why doesn't it exist that you can't bring it to court? Is a reality shift? Is it a court pertained order to not talk about? No, I've seen it as an idea before. ESQs can bring it to a federal mandate. It just takes money for some lawyers, but some lawyers just have to get into the pool. There's always liability within the courts to find your reason to protect the law. That's the point of the law. Just as though insurance is kept for federal employees. Let me see if I can find the law. What is the law that protects federal agents of liability? And it does apply for any government worker. It's not qualified immunity. It's not Westfall Act. I think it's that. Liability in self-defense. I think that's the one. In self-defense, it's about as ordinary or as in scope as they would put it, at least according to the DHS secretary. I think he would be as sharing a relationship with this as possible. And they define each and every single one, even though every jury or their court might disagree. That's kind of like their grounding. Other courts might have said different things. Bush might have said different things. Biden, Obama would say completely different things. Obviously, they wouldn't say, it's the choice, it's the marketable ground, so that people kind of grounding basically. So this kind of goes into the strengths of this. They kind of relate this to supremacy clause immunity, originating in 1890 Supreme Court case in Ray Nigel. This doctrine shields federal officers from state criminal prosecution if they acted under federal authority and held an objectively reasonable belief that their use of force was necessary and proper to carry out their federal duties. It wouldn't really relate to that. Let me kind of address this question. What laws protect security clearances? I think it might have been under that one. No, that's the Privacy Act. It kind of, I'm looking at a different one here. I don't think you could find it. Security clearances for self-defense. Maybe there's a specific one. 2002 security agent, directive outlines the 13 national security objective guidelines to determine clearance eligibility. A valid self-defense claim means there is no criminal conviction, mitigating criminal conduct concern, the whole person concept, adjudicators weigh the nature. Adjudicators weigh the nature, extent, and seriousness of the incident, and whether the individual acted reasonably and lawfully under local self-defense. And that's very disorganized. And we're looking at really rapport, and then need-based necessity. And I mean that can go for about any of them. There's kind of novice in the choice that you would want to hit the biggest target, I would think, on the federal agenda because it's such a big target. And then would it get lost in interpretation or transmission between the courts if it was not? So federal agents are protected from liability when using reasonable self-defense, supremacy clause immunity, qualified immunity. A federal officer removal statute empowers federal agents to transfer any state level civil suit or criminal prosecution to a federal district court. And is it the same for civil? I mean, I've made this video. It's clearly not civil on some levels. They'll say it's orchestrated differently. And I guess if it is a civil liability, according to the courts, just like they say for certain domestic relationships, they might say it's like a counter argument towards technology or information. It's a level, maybe event or level recreation under kind of stricter budgeting laws or something. I don't know. I mean, the case study there would say, hey, let me just kind of leave this unbalanced mess here while everything else has a novice choice. Like you're putting the zero on it, you're finding surrounding, you're finding protection somehow. I guess that might go down to a state level. I mean, I would think it would go down to a state level if there is no need for protection, no need for hold your law, clause done, maybe. But, that brings in the question of invisible structures like money or nature. They might argue. I would say I would totally oppose it because it goes into the collateral of that, and that would be collaterally the operation there. I think that would be the most important. I don't see why you would have to clarify or classify that in any nature because it is already not classified everywhere else. I mean, there's just there's no novice, I think, in the Constitution. Nurturing was the realistic principle. I think that's a bigger play. Not the novice of drugs or choice. You're looking at the nurturing of human versus human interaction. I don't think as a social worker. I think as a real adult, maybe. So I don't really find the liability point for security clearances. Right? I was seeing it for before, but I don't think I see it. I think it was 2003. I don't see it. I don't see the law. There's a protection clause for people with this type of immunity. They're not held civilly responsible. The government will pay for any operational costs that do. But I mean, this specifically is arguing for the question of a mass casualty event. I mean, mass casualty. I mean, if the Earth got killed, I mean, there's looting. I mean, maybe a looting, but the extremity of this case is a whole different category. It's kind of looking at an invasion of the United States. Like, if there was attackers in the United States, gangs, the compulsion was like terrorism, basically. I think that's where it mostly would come from. Let me look at that. Homeland Security Liability Insurance. Yeah, it's called the Safety Act. Here we go. It's the DHS Safety Act. Safety Act liability protections apply to a wide range of technologies, including products, services, software, and other forms of intellectual property. These technologies are designed or modified to identify, detect, deter, respond to, or otherwise mitigate the impact of harm arising from active terrorism. Protections apply only to the claims arising out of, relating to, or resulting from an event the Secretary of Homeland Security was designed active terrorism. So I'm not sure if it's like a funny jot back in the day from like the 2000s, but so it says the seller's liability for products or services deemed design technologies limited to the amount of liability insurance that the Department of Homeland Security determines the seller must maintain. Designation can also be obtained for promising anti-terrorism technologies that are undergoing testing and evaluation. Developmental testing and evaluation designations. Designated technologies is limited to the amount of liability insurance that the Department of Homeland Security determines the seller must maintain. Designation can also be obtained for promising anti-terrorism technologies that are undergoing testing and evaluation. Developmental testing and evaluation designations. Designations in developmental testing and evaluations designations provide the following benefits to companies: liability equals insurance required by DHS. Exclusive action federal court. So there's just the biggest one in case if this was purely academic. I mean, that's one. No joint and several liability for non-economic damages. Several. I think that's one of the misnomers. I guess. No punitive or prejudgment interest. I think it's a misnomer as well. Technically, I wouldn't say it's abstract or an abstract one court. Recovery reduced by amounts from collateral. So recovery reduced by amounts from collateral sources. Well, that one is confused because you lost all the last ones. Because recovery, that's also fingerprints. Nowadays, again, DHS composes fingerprints as technology. So they are technology themselves. So the relationship there in the Safety Act shows, you have order, you have need, you have value or finite reasoning, things like that. But the opposing question is like, you're out of time, you're out of insurance, you're out of liability. It's not counted. You have a relationship that is a business. You have, a stake that is sole proprietor. You are against terrorists. You are against faulty businesses, and you are against the residual thinking of terrorism at all, or buying time for gang violence, whatever it is, which is like kind of more and more. And now, it's finding a relationship between terrorism and different things like WMD is it's as in the same classification level. If this was ever to change, maybe things would be different. But the classification levels, according to August 2026, it's just as special interest as it is this. So the relationship shows these critical necessities of finding something that does ensure a relationship. And it's kind of like and you're in project management, you're in management information systems, you have the blank keys here. You have a key that is blank, and then you might have another key that's blank, and then you might have another key that's blank. And the guy down the street, the cop's like, oh no, you can't have the keys, they're blank. It's against the law. No, in reality, that's what you have as a project manager. You have blank keys, and you hook these keys to something like your database. This is what your job is. You're looking for the information. You're going to put it together. This is key 1. This is key 2. This is key 3. All pretty much in the range of Homeland Security, even though they're ideas, basically. So relationship there, can it count to number 1? If you want it to count 1, like maybe a code is saying like, hey, count to number 1, but then your keys won't really make sense in a way. If that's new to you, then that might be new to you now. But it's a very basic thing there. You need to start to comprehend, kind of like the class structure, in accounting, or relationship of like someone like Engels and Friedrich Nietzsche. They like get together There's a lot of book burning, but then there's a lot of relationships between Gaussian math, or the theories of existential thinkers, I guess, or what they consider physicists, right? And nature, kind of just like Einstein is. I mean, you're looking at a broadly based community that is far away from this tuned idea of something, right? And that's the bargaining point choice, just kind of like the caseworker scenario in liability insurance. You're looking at something. If somebody climbs a mountain all the time, they climb mountains. If somebody goes from island to island, they go from island to island. But it doesn't give them the ability not to climb mountains, right? So that's one principle where you say, hey, the books are stacked against you. If there's no probability range in all of time, then you probably have a reason to do something. But the perception there is still, it's in your mind, right? Something like if Friedrich Nietzsche, or if even Albert Einstein quoted him and said, there's no of nothing except the nothing of extent, or it was actually Lieberman, or it's like some random philosopher, or Marx, or who's that guy? Not Eagles, who wrote that French, book. Monet. His name is not Monet. Gosh, I should always remember that one. But the relationship is, you're finding a way to find a statement, find a lucid point. You're finding a way to stay within your support. You're breaking down friction or fiction and function, right? So it is a lost purpose on most French. It might be a lost purpose on German. It might be a lost purpose on English. But in America, this is a quantifiable, mean, right? It's not the nine of Scotland. It's not the curse of Scotland, right? You're finding a way, and it's not just the digital age. You're finding a way to keep saying you are holding on. You were born with a briefcase in the United States. You're born with the way to function and move. You didn't want the Indians to go kill your tribe of people, the Pilgrims. Yeah, they did that. They don't want to move back to Europe because they're going to become slaves. Yeah, they don't want to go back to Europe, or they'll kill them for their children, right? So I mean, is that, or they don't want to move down south, like the other pilgrims who did and who died from successive illnesses, right? There's not a question of needing to move, of nurture, but when you learn, you go back to Europe, everything finds a mean, you get sick, but you don't want to say it's a sickness. You don't want to say it's the poison of food. Everybody died, right? But on the other end, if you have the blank key, what is the blank key for? It's for a relationship, right? That's right. We're not meant to contract as people. We're not meant to use robots as people. We're not meant to find novice, choices of art. You're finding a way to tempt yourself into something that is frequent, it's functionable, and then it's unsupportive. So we'll put unsupportive first, because that is the novice choice for the modern ethic and psychology, or sociology, or what they consider democracy. It is unsupportive of the neoclass, right, or the neoclassism, as they put it. But the supportive choice is always channeling. You're finding a way to put something somewhere. But in modern society, in democratic thinking, or capitalist society, you have what they consider victimization and other points of view, or they have the couldn't or shouldn't words, right? You should not do this. You could not do this. But it's a normal capitalist society. And it's not saying that it's exclusive of sociological liberty, if that's what you want to call it, or something else. You're looking at mass slavery. You're looking at extensive slavery that is taking place, victimization that is nobody business except the business itself. So the arrangement in theory, you might learn, in English literature, that there's no slavery for the English. And you just say, hush, listen to this. Or they'll say, like, in Russian of decay, there's no slavery here. We're built on serfdom. We're built on a whole vision of something. We're the osnos of the counter world, or the osnos of bridge. Like we're a choice of communication. Or in Ukraine, you might say, yeah, and you wouldn't really understand the choice of matter. But the breaking point there, I mean, it's one culture versus another. But the breaking point is, kind of different surrounding different situations meet, I think, and I mean, civil war isn't probably a good scenario for people to kind of find absurd ideas or issues behind things or find a way to do something else. But it's a good question. I mean, if you're looking at Czechoslovakia, the capital of pornography, or if you're looking at something else, you're not really looking at a war, right? They'll probably, I don't know, stony. They look evil, right? But when you look at something like Ukraine versus Russia, like a little civil war, like like they're in a fight for the lives for really doing dirty to someone. I mean, in English, you do dirty to people. That's the language, right? You key their car in English because it's a secular vision, right? So it's actually in Shakespeare. So the fortune idea goes back to a long time. You're looking at the usual moment of things, and the moment, because it's obscure, it shares a relationship with like nothing at all. You're filling a quota that is nothing at all, because it's the fix of the moment to get someone's attention, right? If they get your attention all day long with the same idea, do you get their attention with some idea? Not for the idea of an invisible key, doing something it shouldn't, because an actualization moment is an actualization moment. But the relationship is a mode. It's median. But, they might say in Russia, we stopped there and things got out of hand and they got out of the carriage, and, there's no more prince. There's no more queen or whatever. But, the relationship in America, they might say, hey, I've heard a different story, and it's this and that. You're the Soviets, you're the USSR, and you're bound to go kill the king again, or the ex-king, whatever you want to call it. There's a tipping point. There's the point in which you have a relationship, but you don't share it, and there's a relationship between having a relationship and then not using it, and that's a territorial thing. I mean, that might be the mountains, that might be conclusively something inland. You're looking at a sole purpose to do something, so maybe different, maybe land or fresh water or something like that. So we went into that one for way too long. I'm sorry. Let's keep on going, and it's probably an hour and 30 minutes long right now. So we are looking at the persistence of this one right here, which is should they be able to drive? That was a long tangent right there. Should machine victims be able to hold a blank key to anything they want to do? Yeah, I think they should be able to write their own thing, if that's their own thing. I mean, if it's not sabotaging people, yeah, why wouldn't she be able to have a blank key? But I mean, the relationship there is, like the blank key itself. It's about the, not just policy. It's about the orchestration, the reality of the manifestation. I mean, if you kept on giving away, all your Oracle code or something else, would you share a relationship with anything in the future? Yeah, but at the same time, if you don't do any participation at all for the thing you're saying, it's going to be something less or more disorganized, right? If there's no internship or no relationship, and some people get to do certain things, some people don't. You think it exists? What level does it exist? What level does it not exist, right? So, in the eyes of the government, they say, if you're not able to, handle hiring a black person for, non this needs, or, I'm not able to hire a Native American for non this needs, or I'm able to not handle or hire a Caucasian for this need, right? So, in the government's eyes, they'll say, yeah, that's the precaution. We don't want to, let anybody out of the necessity, but there's a lot of angles there. I mean, you can't pick one versus the other. But when you look at classification and you kind of say, this is the journeyman, or this is the relationship and the topic of the market. I mean, anyone's to blame in the government, really. I mean, you look at the schedule of cocaine. Cocaine's still scheduled. Do we still use it today? Yes, we do. It's in this stuff right here, and this is a blank ad for a blank day. It's this with the red cap. This has particles of cocaine in it, and I'll put particles as it has some cocaine in it. So the principle there is, I don't drink it. I just have it as a little experiment of mine. But the potential of it is it's like that. It's like, you got to get out of it, right? You got to stop using it, basically. That is America we live in today. I'm afraid it didn't change for the past 80 years. You got to find a way to figure and break out of the cycle of addiction, basically. I mean, yeah, they might say plastic particles are in Pepsi, but at least they don't put cocaine in it, right? They might have put something else like peptides or some other thing. Like you look at all the other drinks. Does it have some sort of different thing in it or something? I don't know. I mean, when you spell it down to spell it down, the bottling industry, especially with analytics or analysis or strategy, you spell it out syrup, 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 and you look up, porter. So he's a talker about this acronym, syrup. Potential need versus potential value there. But I mean, if you're going to catch a class in business, I mean, it'll be done. It'll be taken care of. You already learned the subject. It'll probably be an hour of your time. And that's it. Done. Oh, maybe 2 hours for the article, not done and done. So there's another 2 hours there. And then maybe 3 or 4 hours, to put the PowerPoint together. Maybe. I don't know. It just depends. But the relationship there is you're finding a way to stir up, create, and then evaluate instead of just breaking it down. And it might be kind of way of saying, not learning more, I'm learning less, but you're finding a way to develop something based on need, based on rational ratio, things like that. Should mass shooting victims be denied security clearances about their level or actual event? Gosh, should you be denied the facts and realization to look into the effort of your mass shooting victims or your actual mass shooting clearance level, or the clearance in which it's held to look at that? Well, yeah, the relationship is in the government's eyes. Yeah, you don't have the functional priority to classify your mass shooting versus B, a clearance level of mass shooting. So that is true. The effort or effect there is maybe you, maybe your situational surroundings, maybe your family, things like that. The order of events, maybe going to school, maybe finding and obtaining a security clearance. I don't know why others wouldn't be able to do that at the same time and focus. It would just be kind of counter intuitive. I think, according to the government, it wouldn't really make too much sense to do things at a skill level differently than other people. I think that would be abnormal. So, I mean, would you be denied it? I mean, is it being denied it if you were diagnosed with absurd depression or anxiety or a major depression? I mean, there's a lot of things you could be, diagnosed with to lose it technically for a temporary reason, maybe, but there are reasons behind your actions. So I think, primarily when you look, in psychology, your choice yourself, it always comes first, right? So doesn't mean, somebody is taking your life, exactly, but it does mean that, your support network needs to find a way to kind of just adjust towards, your liveliness, right? Just like anyone else would. They just have to find a reason to make sure it's sound or kosher. I think this is a basic building blocks there. If you can't find that, you can't find a real need, skill, organization, basic level. And you might break it as your communication or your support need systems, but it gets mixed sometimes. I mean, kind of like, when you're looking at insurance, you're looking at liability. I mean, you could, want to do it, and there's nothing wrong with it, but the relationship there is, the more you hide, little issues, sometimes they can get more affordable or disintegrate, some sort of idea, or, break apart, the reality of, what you're earning, what your potential is. Everything should be kind of finding a way to stay valid, but, at the opposite, agenda, if it's not a cornerstone, if everything doesn't make up a makeup, does it need to be fine tuned? Do you need an actualization method to fine tune your ear, the equipment, the music equipment? I mean, it should just kind of be normal. It should be fine tuned just for the pizzazz of the moment, for the reality of need, right? That doesn't mean you're bold. It doesn't mean you're going to do certain things in which you don't do. But the reality is you have a choice. You have a need that I don't know if you can hear it enough, but you have a need that needs to be fulfilled somehow. I mean, even if it was a blank key, you have to find a way to create an actual positive movement. Not everything is perfect in life, is what I'm basically trying to say. So let's go to the next question. Should mass casualty victims be able to move more than one spouse or one girlfriend out of the same? Oh, I'm sorry, to have more than one spouse or girlfriend. Like there's the security levels and reality. I mean, that's a question to ask. I mean, if you had dated someone who didn't know you were in a mass shooting, and then you dated someone else and they didn't know you were in a mass shooting, would it be a revelation, or I'm sorry, a realization for their part? Would it be a relationship that you would be stronger off, even though it was broken off sooner? So that's a very good question. In modern normal psychology, to say you share about like around 12 relationships with people for a normal person. But, as things fall apart, they have the culture, the counterculture. I suppose they don't really refer to it that way, as, people are in the dating scene, or, they're maybe in the marriage dating scene, or, they might believe in certain things like, momentary sale of videographic content for adults. I mean, it's a question, because, when you look at the relationship of certain things, you might find, business might say, hey, I sell business plans for polygraphs, but I also sell them for, adult, themed content. You got to say, hey, well, the buck stops here. We got to find a way to limit. And they might say, hey, you got to find a way to stay agile and, less limited, or, more flexible, or, at the work job. But the other arguments say, hey, agile, that's just another way of saying art, and that's been stolen or something. Like, it's not a precaution. It's saying like, hey, agile is the same network and computing that we use for the FBI office when we get our paintings in that have been stolen. They're like, hey, yeah, that's pretty much sure. Well, the bank says like, hey, we use agile as a way to methodologically count products and other consumer choice, and that's the only system we use. They're like, yeah. But when you look at that, it's a tangible force. You're finding a need for something. You're finding a need to do something. Doesn't mean it's stubborn, but with all things you count on their hand, unless it's skyrocketed or something. But at the same time, you look at parallels of habit, industry, Novus. I mean, basic forwarding concepts rather than Erickson's. So old, they love cocaine, obviously that stuff. But when you compare it to the life cycle, Carl Jung expands on that. Erickson compares on that. It says the schedulization is important. Finding a relationship between habit, things. You're not looking at words anymore. You're looking at frustration-free technology. You're looking at basic shapes, circle, polygram, or something. You're looking at things that are fine-tuned, and you go into fine-tune, you become more and more simple over time, kind of like a fork would be. But when you compare two forks together, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. It's a bad point. Usually it's a point that is obstructive. Should you make loud noises if you don't have to at night? Should you make them during the day? Should you make a frequency pitch for a computer if you don't see it? So the obstructive is real on certain points and levels, but they're mostly mundane. They're mostly maintained as well, but they're poorly done, right? I mean, there's not a word, again, it's a word salad. You're finding a way to kind of break into the system in a way that should not be breaking down. Even if you slow it down, even if you speed it up, if you're breaking a watch apart, you're finding a mallet. You're finding a way to fine tune it softly and hard, just like in biochemistry, just like in microbiology. When you look at something that is hard to fit, you're looking at the reaction, everything is going around you. It is choices you're looking at. It's not some figurative number. It's a system, God willing, but when you put $1 into the system that doesn't have $1 entrance, do you think there's a question? What about if you put a number 1 in there? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure as a computer goes, you could put a little extra 1 or 0 in there and say, hey, that computer isn't responding very well. We put a 0 in there and they didn't really do much. And we said, hey, is this right or wrong? Do you think it would matter if it was like, they're wrong or wrong point? Would it matter? So, I mean, there's a lot of cues and frustrations there, right? You might say, oh, I don't owe you this money. After all, it was just, the vibrations of the computer. Or like, oh, I didn't have the choice to update my computer that day and it kind of froze and broke apart. Or like, hey, I took this computer and it said, I have a major error and my software needs to be updated. It won't let me update it, but I've been hacking it back in the day. Or like, hey, my computer, it's sharing a relationship. It's pretty positive right now. It's 1-1 here. I don't know. Or it's kind of like, I'm 2-1 right now, or I'm 3-1 right now, or I'm 4-1. And we're like, hey, like it's okay. It's okay. But the reality though is it's an invisible net. It doesn't equal out to anything because it's never been made before. Same as any organization skill, same as any ability to make something that is not just like a TV screen, just like a microwave, just like, a toaster oven. You're finding a way to put it in, to do something new with that, right? So as simply as it could basically be on a computer of a bunch of math operators, I can go into that in a little bit. But the relationship there is a business. Again, that's the bigger thing. They're choosing the point to prove across every communication channel is a method to communicate, is a method to find a way to break something down, to put out the message, right? No matter what. So if somebody gives you the blue color, communication, you already know communication, right? So if someone says green, grounding, we're solving something, we're creating something, but it doesn't mean the opponent can't do it. So if they're mad enough over time, can they grow enough green over time? Could they be blue over time? Yeah, they could do that. But in world colors today, we don't really have it. It's not exactly normal procedure, at least, right? Procedure wise, it's not normal. Procedure wise, it could be, right? Maybe not, right? I'm not going to put anyone on the map right there. So, I don't know. So when you go into the next questions here, we'll look at other things. And when you look at events, focus, they're very tied together mostly, kind of like camp would be. Go up to the auditorium, announce, you say, hey, guys, this is the adult camp, and we're doing a head count. Be normal. Hey, be a little normal. Be like the one behind you, the blindfold their face and saying, okay, enough is enough. My reality, my choices are succumbing to the weakest point of my body, and the point is I need to stop being I wouldn't say crazed or abnormal. I would say really find a revelation, find a supportive need to do something. Don't make something up that doesn't really make sense. Make something real. You're not the drummer boy in your late 40s saying I am about to use 2 sticks with one hand, right? Find a way to find a reality between your choice, right? Find a way to, count to 10. Find a way to, support the things around you. If it's not, telling people to count to 10, leave a mark. I don't know. Count your breath, breathe fresh air. Find a way to do it. Do it, better, right? You don't usually say, do it correct. Do it the best way you can do it. That's just kind of human voice, right? So let's go into the next question. Should they not have the ability to date multiple people? So, I mean, against the security clearance thing, I mean, I don't think anyone in the world has any laws against it. Maybe date your cousin, I guess. I guess certain places, right? But the reality there is choice held methods. If you had a bunch of people who were your cousins and they started dating each other, would that change things? I mean, yeah, maybe. But the reality there is kind of a time held lesson, a lot of people with the same name, a lot of people with the same choices, a lot of people with, the same scenario. Is it evening out? Is it going to get better? Is there going to be a choice in front of you? No. Will there be a reality between, going online to a foreign website? marrying somebody who's in a war in which you've invested in, if you're going to put it that way, if your cousin's cousin is your cousin and he's adopted your business as your cousin and finds a relationship as your cousin to, date your cousin. I mean, there's a lot of the question, you're finding frustration a way to vent, right? Then you have the relationship to like kind of this support, and it even needs to make a means, right? You're finding one thing to go in front of something else, and then you're waiting, right? So you're finding a way to not, create, right? You're not creating with your mind right now. You're finding a way to see, right? You're finding a way to do something more than a normal person would do on a whole different, not level spectrum. You're finding a relationship between many things. So the organizational choice there is huge, right? But when you find a way that you cannot do this, the spectrum is kind of like, it's an elusive point. You're finding mistakes in the system. To separate yourself out, I mean, most people go to talk therapy. They find a way to talk to other people in what they consider a group mentality. I mean, you're finding a way to talk to talk. Find a way to maybe go to AA, NA, Debtors Anonymous, Smokers Anonymous, Sex Anonymous, right? Survivors of Sex Anonymous, family members of Sex Anonymous. There's many things and many choices you can make, but the reality there is you're finding a way to share, right? You're sharing a story, a vision. Is there a lot of technology or improvisation for this technology here for anti-mass shootings? Again, there's not. It's a relationship that you'd like to share, that you'd like to see, but just isn't there. You put the sound on, you put the audio on, you go into basically what we consider the meeting place as an artist or musician or a liberal thinker. You're going into the meeting place. You're saying, "Oh no," but you're saying it differently because you're developing a way to do it. You're finding a way to tune in. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It means it's the right way to do it, but there was some sort of mistake there. You're going to say you're at a meeting place, but you're not at the meeting place, right? So, the relationship kind of shows, you have your hand in this. You have no, developmental sense that says no, but the relationship says, hey, I don't know, if it's like, everybody have access to email and computer here and never heard of, something they've never heard of before. They've never had access to nothing ever. Then yeah, I mean, they might say, yeah, that's why I don't like that. But then, when I go into the meeting place, I say like, it doesn't really make sense to me. Like, why does this music remind me of this? Why does this remind me of that? Or like, kind of like, why it's such a bad time do I go into a meeting place? So, you could say no, or you could say like, yeah, kind of, the meeting place is, a technology improvement center. It's a way to break away from something, but where's the choice at? What have you never broken out of? And you're kind of like, yeah, but then no, because everything kind of follows the ideas, but like the surroundings. You're looking at like difficulty, technology difficulty, needs that are needed, right? They're not words. They're improvements, basically. So I mean, maybe making improvements is one way. Finding a way to communicate is another. Finding a way to find a supportive means to do it. I mean, that's a good way to do it. Um, would they be attached to like something like liability insurance? That would be a very difficult question to break apart from or break into. It would be quite serious in a nature to ignore all the facts in the world. So you'd have to say, yeah, it would be truly hardening, if something like that would be real. It would also be, so unsupportive. It would be not just disorganized. I don't even know if it would be disorganized. It would be, theory versus fact or theory versus, adjacent reality, right? Like, if we had a, total lockdown or there was a shelter in place order, it'd be kind of like, obscure, right? I think, at the top level moment for someone who's in this thinking strategy, if you don't find an arrangement to your theory can never end. But then, as well as if no one ever believed in the right categorization of reality, there would be no situation. That might be addiction today. That might be, the surrounding facts of post-traumatic stress disorder in some ways. It might be the freedom of impression for social, distinctive disorders or antisocial disorder. I mean, the list does go on. the pairing cue of sociology is something like journalism is writing. So it's big, but it's often miscategorized. And I think more and more nowadays, publication rights, they're all saying they're completely different. I think that fine tunes a lot of it. So, and they do separate social fact versus matter, social realm versus information. So the question there is almost project based. It's based on your own independent thinking and your own independent reasoning. So it is a question of building something on top of nothing, right? The support there is choice, is supportive need for a lot, but when it comes to everything, I mean, there's the opposite, and it's still the same but different, right? So that's the way I would put it. There's no even way to break down one thing, right? Should there be a time limit on a mass shooting victim's thoughts or organization skills when sharing? I mean, 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, may I mean, list would just go on. I would successfully think a journal would be good. Finding a way to talk and communicate would be good. But in, ordeal such as lack of communication methods because of energy crisis or something that's real, it would have to be real. It would have to have some sort of supportive skill set that is unreasonable. I would think like a telecommunication radio, basic things that are obstructive, or technology that's embarrassing, maybe, or support systems that just are uneasy. Bicycle can be uneasy. There's a lot of things that are uneasy. Equipment that's manufactured poorly, it's uneasy. Gap chip that just is wrongly made, it's pretty uneasy. That's not fair. That's not a rocket made of paper, as they put it. No October, rocket for me. Thank you. So I mean, don't place it on me to say, hey, this guy's right and this guy's wrong. But when you look at the even odds, you just know somebody has to be honest, right? When you're finding a time limit on something, it should be maintaining the cultural revelation, right? So social order, empathy, yeah, but little do you find that there's a recreational positivity between those things. Sometimes in just social matters, right? Social is a revelation of people getting together and thinking the same idea. Yeah, I don't want my blank niece or my cousin or something, my daughter to get whatever, right? But you do want a relationship with saving people, right? So I mean, there's a curiosity that bites the cat, as they put it. But the relationship is, it's not normal, as they put it as well. Like saying like Alice in Wonderland is different from Lucy in the Sky and Diamonds, the Beatles song. I mean, the relationship is there, but the relationship is also, maybe about a box of drugs and some, DEA officer's office that says, you don't use drugs today. I mean, I don't know, but that would be like my pretend story of reality, right? Britain's story is Britain's story is reality because it is old versus English, right? You're Amish and you're in England and you're doing your thing, but it doesn't mean you can build a suitcase, right? It doesn't mean you have a handbag, right? So the principle and policy is new. It's a new age, theory or idea. It's about breaking down existential thought into a greater good. You're letting the older people take care of problems that the younger people used to do. It doesn't mean the older people used to do, younger people thing. It doesn't make sense. You just have to find a relationship between two things that are, beyond privacy, beyond norms. In a way, because as college students, we are learning in a modern age that we are building college as we are speaking, right? There is no technology that was just written overnight. We are now the new professors. We are now teaching students how to do new things, right? No one has ever invested in this much technology and communication, and it has become operable that we don't even know how to monitor or regulate or rationalize what we're saying right now. Okay, so but the one thing a professor said to me is, you get an easy A for being so nice and polite, or going over the board for certain reasons or situation. But yeah, but no, still no internships, still no valuable skills of thinking, still no divisive needs for breaking away from the countercultural and all. You take cough medicine, and but did the cough medicine or whatever it is made out of like pretty pure magnesium, right? So therefore, it's a drug, or like it's a drug you didn't even know the name of, right? So I mean, it's not to be played. It's not to be recreationalized in a way. You're finding a reason to do the not the doable, not to find something that's crazy, not to hallucinate. It's to find a reason behind meaning, right? And it's not always about what they might consider getting pregnant. It's not about crazy things. Right? You're finding a reason to do something normal, right? So that goes into the drug analogies or thing. I mean, McKenna was one of the artifacts of some of the counterculture in that way, as the red light and blue light in Vietnam War, or McKenna is. But the relationship between modern drugs nowadays, you put it in the trash can. You're no longer doing these things because you're not meeting any satisfactory need, right? Yeah, but say like PCP or some of these drugs, these designer drugs back in the day in the military, or obs- obs- ob- 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 their relationship. They share a relationship. Yeah, some of them do share a relationship with the mind of a chemical, and how it was developed as a physical purpose. There's nothing of a scare about, but then you hear why they did it. No, I accidentally did this, but it actually did that. That doesn't really make sense. You just start sticking things in your mouth without protective equipment, does it? I don't think for me that would make very much sense. It makes sense like I found a way to do this, but I didn't find a way to do it. It's kind of like I don't know. I didn't really find a way to eat until I picked it up and ate it. Why would you come up with something differently? So I mean, if you read like beyond the mainstream media of these people, maybe you'd understand the relationship between why people have used drugs, right? It's not to be passively using drugs to obtain from or abstain from one frequency from another. It's like the fork you're thinking about and talking about. You're finding a reason or a way to adapt to something incorrectly, right? Direction isn't to go back in time. It isn't to put something on the scale. It's not to find a relationship, but you're finding a relationship with why something works that way. When if it's the biggest things in the world that don't work, and someone like Steve Jobs would have said this, make sure you do the smallest things. So like if it was all the grass in the world that was causing the most poisonous oxygen, grab a blade of grass and put it in your mouth. Of course, it's going to taste bad. It's going to taste awful. But you're learning a lesson. Maybe not the gasoline grass, but the grass that doesn't hurt, right? So the relationship there isn't like normal, right? A normal person in down south wouldn't say that. It wouldn't say, no, we're not eating the grass today, or we're not going to eat leaves today. So like the principle stays the same. If it's the biggest, smallest of something like Albert Einstein would say, or the Volkswagen company would say, it's the most systematic, right? You are basically the most of just leaving it there, right? If you're gonna put it in one way, just put it leaving it there, right? If it's the principle of like just kind of like the most obscure idea ever, maybe it's like Tanzu's theory of war, or just like the letter Y, or the abstract idea behind it. You're kind of like looking at I am beyond operable. I am within the yang, or like I'm within the yin. It's a short, me, as they put it. But you wouldn't say it like that because it is something you can count. It's a quote. It's a reason to live. It's successful. Money, on the other hand, is operable. It's a blessing in disguise. It doesn't mean just throw everything out, right? It means to find a reason to satisfy the mean. This is this. This is fortune. This is need. This is maybe capitalism, but it is a means to make a need. And if you're looking at, the dollar sign from back in the day, it's still in use today. It's just a different system. It's a different etiquette, right? Standard etiquette. It just means to not move now, move later. Move now for now's sake, right? If you're dependent on the yin, now is now. If you're dependent on something else, now is later, so to speak, right? So now is later without a need, right? It's a fixture of time. It's of a need, you can't realize, right? So that's another question. That's a different language style as well. Right. So should they be able to notify the police or federal government differently compared to someone on a lower spectrum of victims compared to an undercover operator? Well, that could mean a few things. As a undercover operator, would be the realization of like maybe a DEA agent, someone who's running a business to make these ideas in which we talked about the Safety Act, or finding a relationship between a lower spectrum. I mean, the degree of which you've seen it, and I mean you're looking at compared to someone a lower spectrum of victims. I mean, looking at somebody a lower spectrum, should they be able to identify and notify the government, or just notify the government in general? I've heard that one before, maybe a tax account or something. But the relationship, there is also should they be able to notify people differently? I think a normal person would kind of stick to their research basis, like go LinkedIn, go on to finally something like a forum, find a relationship between those things, a community town hall meeting. But these secret private meetings, I think, basically just have to be removed. Unless they're for a real reason. But yeah, I think the commitment in the community of like, Hollywood actor makes the money, people invest down low, and they're like kind of like, yeah, or the college kids like, it's time for the new party to the new, prostitution scheme, if that's what you want to call it, or like the new adequate reason to live. But when you think, one means one, or one now means like a dozen dead, or like one means outlandish, or kind of like so unsobering, you can't find a reason. Yeah, maybe not so much. Maybe it's kind of like saying you're not going to hire slave labor anymore and make jokes about slave labor. Instead, I want your information. Kind of can't really do much about it. As a caseworker, or somebody who's in the midst of the problem, would you share a relationship with something or someone you can focus on, or focus on now? Do you think it's full of spite? I mean, if it's spite, then I mean, there's a hate crime, right? It's pretty easy with that one. I mean, it's kind of like you're doing the opposite now. I mean, with spite, you're counting it. I mean, the relationship there has got to be like you got to be super indifferent. If you're focusing on all that, then like what really would happen? I mean, if I may ask, what really happened for it to get much worse or much better than somebody else in that situation? If you were low level versus an undercover operator, why would it matter? Right? You've tuned a fine skill there that is like a teacher and a relationship between like a student, like learning an art form, or like a professor, obviously more adult like that, or an intern, or an apprentice, right? So apprentice, right? So the question there isn't about fine tuning the skill. I mean, it's kind of like almost disappropriate, like as a father and son thing, right? But the relationship there is also, you're lower spectrum, you're not medium spectrum. Well, what does that mean? Obviously, it doesn't count. Like, in a heat wave, it doesn't count. You can't really do much. We don't have a day off from this, right? We have now compared to like, what somebody would do. And what does an undercover operator do, right? Do they manage databases? They manage things that they can't understand, right? Is quantifiable data just quantifiable because it's never been seen by their eyes before? What if you said you worked at the biggest agency next to Amazon, and you own like, 0.03% of the market, and a lot of people start investing in you? Would that break anything or communication channel? Or what if like you said, like you were the number one forum, person to write on a forum just because you wrote on it, like, 5 times every month? You see there was a relationship just because you type something in and say like it doesn't exist? The other world, I mean, does that make sense to you? Does it make sense to you saying like the computer is monitored and actively regulated by somebody else? Right? I mean, the opposite of saying, is there a undercover operator I mean, an operator, that's a big business word. As an operator would be an operator, you would run a group home. You run, a business of houses. BlackRock is an operator and hires operators to run their houses, right? So, I mean, it's not like normal behavior. You running an operator or an operation. I mean, you'd have to have a reason to do so. I believe that's the normal procedure. If it's another operation, is it logistics? In this logistics, transportation delivery service kind of thing, like Amazon, or is it logistics like computer logistics? You're writing things down like this. This is a operator that is in doing logistics, right? So you've got to say, is it the computation you're talking about? Your computer. See, there's a difference there. You saying there's a computer that has set a date means there's computation in the factor, right? If you have an undercover operator and it says, I have fake dates, just like the federal government says, is regulated for actually, and it says, that's not a computer, or it's not quoted as a computer for the federal government. I mean, what is the quantifiable need versus the very basis there, right? There's a relationship still, but how would you understand it if you're an undercover operator working for a spectrum of low-level victims who are, I mean, I'm trying to understand the operation there of the opposite of the spectrum of the victims comparing themselves to someone compared to, and then notify the police. What wouldn't be there and what wouldn't be making sense? There's no notch that says the FBI will do this and does not do that or respects it. So it's kind of like burying a loved one, saying here's my representation of a $50 coin, right? And the silver coin might have buried someone years ago, 30 years ago, or so, or like 15 years ago, like some people. But the relationship there is kind of like no, it doesn't do no good. I mean, you can grab a handful of coffin nails and you can nail a coffin, but does it do any good? It's kind of like, looking at the mean-spirited kids nowadays who are millionaires and bankroll their money. Is it good to steal like a group full of, nails to go nail on coffins? I mean, it's not normal behavior. Is it normal behavior to keep on buying, liquidated goods from another country and then put them up somewhere? That's not normal behavior, right? It's normal behavior to have, wood tables, to have, things you like that are permanent. Yes, that's normal behavior. It's not normal behavior, or it's not normal behavior to, buy hydrogen peroxide and clean things with, right? It's not normal behavior to, duplicate the idea or the necessity based on something that you've seen. That's not normal behavior. I can tell you for a fact, some people do this. Some people, recreationalize this. I mean, there's a need based, there's a want based, but it's basically dependent on the color. The idea of this concept is NOR. It's NOIR. You're begging a truth to bring into a duplicate. It's a NOR composition of something new wave, or finding a reality behind something you love, something you have compassion for, but then something you give away for what they consider the game. NOR is basically a building block that's built into game theory, right? NOR technology, NOR, envisionment or ideas about being stealthy, being optional, being not ignorant, being you'll probably have to look up the word. I forget, but it's not narrative either, but it's being supportive in a way, right? Fine tuning, it in a way. You might find a little bit of that information in French class. You might find it in French too. You might find it in French literature, English literature. Is it just the basic era policy of the French policy? No, it doesn't go into the Rococo like art, things like that. Not really. I mean, Eiffel Tower is completely different than that. You're looking at not new wave. You're looking at personalization. It's kind of like beyond like the Renaissance, beyond collective romanticism, personification, or like personalization. It's kind of like a type of art. It's kind of like viral meme. You find a way to keep your mind on something. God bless your mind, right? But you keep your idea of choice in the matter, not because it's it's bad, it's good. You keep your personal choice is it's an adaptation towards, not meme, but a theme. I mean, I think a lot of people perceive memes and themes and ideas differently. So their composition, or the compatibility, whatever structure and strength is completely different. Because you feed something, just kind of like you feed, a cat, you feed, an animal. That's the thinking skill. You feed a computer power, you feed a camera power, so you earn the idea in a way, or you kind of limit yourself as a thinker, right? Like just like saying something repetitively over and over again, you'd say, "Hey, I will give it to a reason to do something." Right, not for a reason. Just kind of like communicating. You give it a reason to do something. You're communicating, right? You're finding a way to do something, right? It's kind of like a sonnet would be. Find a way to break something, or find a way to be even with something, and find a way to break something, right? And two, right? You find a way to do something, and you find a way to do something for, right? You don't say, I want to do this for all the time, right? Or you don't say, I want to, and I want for, right? Increase the average, increase the odds. So, what is the difference between cooperating witness and an informant or an undercover? So, the difference between cooperating witness, I mean, you've seen a crime, you've seen technology that has been different. You've seen, maybe not, let me see, a spy. Just checking with you. Between a cooperating witness and an undercover, you're a police officer, no matter what, unless you're like working for the federal government, like, a Delta operator would be, I'm just joking, a JTAC or JSOC would be the command centers that are adapted to the Department of Justice. You work for the police department, you work for a federal agency, but you work for something else like the IRS. I mean, there's plenty of ways you could work, but the cooperating witness, you're working as somebody who has coincided the fact, the ideas, you're a reliable source. In certain ways, a volunteer might be more considered a cooperating witness than an informant. But an informant or cooperating witness can be inexchangeable. And also, a cooperating witness or an informant can also be referenced towards somebody like a kid. So it's best out of luck and more secure in that way, as though undercovers do most of the work, as they are undercovers that are formally doing the work. But with what you heard about technology and what you heard about a nuisance, public nuisance, or a public remnants of maybe bad policy, evil ideas, terrorist thought. Yeah, yeah. And then can you be released for terrorism nowadays? There's not an exact method or example, and that's usually what back in the day we used to go on. I mean, if you had a terrorist idea or thought, they lock you up and put away the key. But the ideas were terrorist in a mind, in a way. Did they have to do with drugs? Is another question. Now, drugs are much more lenient. People have developed a way to stop the precursors coming from in, finding a way to manufacture drugs, or also finding a way to sterilize those who have not been sterilized. I mean, sterilize their equipment, because it's just clearly it's there for a reason, but not for an open spoken needed usage, right? So, and that's basically it. I mean, an undercover informant or an undercover, they're all different things. They all mean different things. Is there a way to, kind of make a means? Maybe an informant working for a business, but you already know when it cuts off. You already know that somebody shouldn't, mind their business in a certain way. I mean, they shouldn't have to do something that they shouldn't have to do. That's not normal world. That's not normal ethics. That's not normal need, right? Need is about finding a way to not suppress somebody's voice, or you create a problem along the line. It's about finding a way to make things safer in the bigger, longer run. If that's the community, that's the community. Something like an undercover, going to something like the witness protection. Is it had? Is it not had? I mean, you're looking at the potential of looking at someone who's going to state prison for things, racketeering. I mean, that's the biggest word right now, racketeering. But the potential there is huge. But is it so huge that it would start an army to stop an army? I don't know. You're asking questions that don't really make sense. But if the army is already elusive, we stop. And then what stops that, right? So I mean, there's always a bridge. There is the bridge, right? So it's only just a question upon a question. So the next question: should they be able to hide information from police or federal agents? People in mass shootings, should they be able to hide information from someone like that, or would it be instant hysteria, basically? I think that's a fairly good question. Hysteria, yeah, hysteria is not the need for anything. I think I talked about that earlier, but it's really about the relationship between what is correctly in the mindset versus correctly in the deceptive principles. Should they be able to hide it though? I mean, if there's a lot of evil people in the world, I would think yeah. But as someone with the same advice, somebody who has given zero of it, I mean, or heard of it, I've heard of this one before. I've heard of should they be able to hide information? I mean, yeah, I might be the pit of your stomach might say yeah, no, and obviously that's always the wrong thing, always the right thing. But when you hide information, sometimes it gets worse. Sometimes it gets better. Sometimes you have to find a way why you can share information. Yeah, but sometimes you have to find a way to not just hide information, but kind of make it more supportive for me. So that's your narrative theory right there. That's your social adjustments. I mean, we're going your social matters to your relationship with yourself, maybe during the night, during your day with your family. I mean, your choices are holding strong no matter where you go. It might be the first time you go in the military, it might be something else, your first degree or something, it might be your social worker now. I think the relationship with the narrative theory, a principle, is like it's your way to kind of assort the problem out plainly, right? You're telling a story. I mean, it doesn't have to be a whole story. You can give a story about your day, selective reasoning. That isn't like you're maybe giving too much away. There's things that intersect no matter what, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean it. It doesn't necessarily mean someone is capable of giving that thought. So maybe sharing a little bit of your story, a little bit of your time doesn't hurt anybody really, unless it's like completely forbidden. But in that case, just maybe ask questions, find a better way to do it. Right? If it's your information, it's private. Yeah. If you have to keep it private, just find a way to do it more normal. Right? I mean, if it's normal kept, it's normal. Supportive, right? I mean, if you're saying surprising, almost surprising, then what's surprising about going on the internet? What's surprising? You have to find a way to express freedom somehow. The internet is just one way to express freedom, right? So I mean, I'd say in a funny voice to say, "Hey, that's just one way to express freedom. You just have to find another way." I mean, it might be mean, it might be melancholy, but it might just be mean overall. But the reality there is, gosh, don't cry your eyes out. Be real about the situation. Be real because it's important. I think that's the most normal thing you could say. And if somebody says they suspect it, just kind of think about are you going through the process of being a younger adult? Are you being in the process of finding something new? Yeah, yeah. I mean, but is it the same problem over and over and over and over again? Can you grind your teeth and say yeah? I mean, or you can say no a bunch of times and say like everybody's filled with the idea no today, and I don't know what to do. Um, you know, break it the way you should down. I mean, break it, the way that a normal person might say, yeah. But do it in the way that's not going to give your territory away. That's the bigger thing. I mean, let's stay away from territory. Just be organized for once. Say like, it's selective, but then if it's share, just share your story that way, right? It's your critique. It's your technology. You're thinking about the normal, features of life. They should do normal things, right? And then stay protected, obviously. Obviously. Let's say the next question here: should there? I mean, normal. I mean, in that range, obviously, add the normal on top of the normal, or general on top of the general. When things are more private or principal, always protect people no matter what, but do always have precaution no matter what. So it's a good question as well. police do not automatically commend rhetorical ethic for law enforcement. It doesn't mean they own, your procedure. It doesn't mean they own your novice choice of constitutional rights, your ethic, your reasons. But it does mean that their computation is interfering with the idea of your realized normalcy. And I hear that a lot. It's like kind of like I have a problem and I don't know how to solve it. That is big. Yeah. But then they say I have a problem that's big, but it's not normal. So it's like kind of like a system clash. They don't just mean to go together, right? So it's the bigger question, and doesn't make you an informed, doesn't make you an undercover to understand those things. It means that you can count, right? So if you can count the number of problems that happen today, you don't count them like a machine would in that aspect. It's never been invented. You don't count by sixes, you don't count by sevens, you don't count by fours. It doesn't work that way. I mean, you might count by fours. Maybe there's a technology for that, but the realistic tendency there is you will count by bundles, ideas that are very primitive in a way. Police often do count by numbers. They count by segregated data. They can count by normalized data. They count by counts of data, but they also count by exponential needs of data because they can and can get away with it, right? That's the normalcy of the relationship for that, right? That means you're counting to zero. You're counting to nothing, right? To a normal person, it means the exponential means you're counting to something to nothing. You're creating expectation and then nothing. You don't have the security rate, but then that also goes into security clearances that goes into the technology range you have, and that's even the technology you learned, right? If you have a food certificate, that's 1. Security guard, that's 2. Teaching license, that's 3. If you have social work, that's 4, right? All of that matters. All that is in the security clearance. All that matters is that you're finding a way, an arrangement or range to do it. But the creation of that doesn't mean it's a new system or it's an old system. It means you're basically breaking through something. When it comes to exponential need, exponential value, it does not weaken. It does not get bigger. It is always there, just like any other number, right? You might deplete energy from it, but then it would be fictional. Right? We're not dealing with any fictional computer. We did away with this kind of Cisco system a long time ago, right? It was evil back in the day. They didn't like Cisco back in the day. They liked it because it was brighter. It was a computer with more power, right? We're looking at computer quantitation differently because we are in different systems. We are looking at quantitation because it is a different value, right? It's just a bunch of numbers, but you can't speed through something because it's necessary, right? You have to find a way to break away from the function by breaking it down, foiling it. Find a better way to foil it. You don't use it on things. You don't use crazy ideas on things. What do we know about that? Don't use crazy guns on things. Don't use crazy words on people. Don't surprise people while they're at their weakest, while they're the most pain. Yeah, the rules. So let's go to the next question. Should there be a code of conduct held in place? Absolutely. Just like Constitution, there's always a code of conduct put into place, right? It doesn't mean use the words in which you have. It doesn't mean, skip means skip. I mean, it sort of does, but it means that you have to read about these issues. It's academic in a way. A lot of these things you point out to things like, shootings, the levels of mass media, of mass design, of everything that you're looking for has interconnectedness. Even when things don't go together quite right, there's connectiveness there. There's a reality there. There's a change up there. When one thing gets bigger and one thing gets smaller, connected for a reason. Connected. It's just like physics. Motion is acceleration, or motion times acceleration equals whatever, right? Or MC equals square. If that's E equals square, if that's what you want to put it, that's what you have. But motion, acceleration, movement, right? So the reason there is genuine. It's supportive, but it also has a word bubble upon a word bubble, and you'll start to understand that as time goes through. Making a means to make now, right, is also an important thing, right? So let's go to the next question. Should they get a break at certain points and times of the day? according to work schedules, you should always have a break, like every like 5 hours, right? For at least 45 minutes. Do they have a schedule that says you can't work? What about getting paid? I mean, yeah, I'd say you have to get paid, and you have to get paid for the right reasons. They can't say, "Oh, no, you were getting paid by the wrong reasons. You're under observation, and we took all your facts and ideas, and we thought, hey, federal workers only get paid $7 an hour, so we pay you that, but then we also pay you overtime." It's not really a funny joke, is it? I mean, it's a really bad joke if you call it that. But the relationship is same. I mean, money earned is a consensual income between the community and people. They vote, they write, they act, they think. Um, they what they consider do things with their bodies, the mind, a lot of things. But one thing is people do not owe people money because they do things like that. That's just not how the economy works, and especially with any code of conduct. um, and especially with having a break from the day, there is no interference that says you owe people money for their break, right? The same as like the exponential need. You do not owe people money, but it doesn't mean that that person doesn't believe in exponential need, right? So there's a fortune loss believing in something like that, but there's a fortune that's needed for something like that. If there's no break for something that is exponentially proven wrong, right? There's a reason for it exponentially proven right, correct? So, if there's a novice choice of communication, then it is related to population, right? So, I mean, some sort of population. It doesn't mean it breaks even, it breaks the need. So, you're just fitting another point of the communication together, right? I think that's what I'm pretty much saying. I mean, you can break any data down in a normal world. There's variables in every data, but why wouldn't it work for anything else? A break is just like anything else, right? If you can't break for something, it doesn't mean you have post-traumatic stress. If no one's ever done it, checklist there. It doesn't mean you have ADHD. Nope. Do you have OCD? Nope. Do you have a relationship between life and death moments of recurring? Does it mean you have panic disorder? Nope. Does it mean you have anxiety or schizophrenia? Nope. Antisocial disorder? Nope. Does that mean you've been in a mass shooting? I don't know. Maybe a checklist there, or maybe a check mark. Does it mean your serotonin syndrome? Nope. Does it mean you have the ability to, you know, um, be depressed? Nope. I mean, but then they might say, oh, a little bit, and then there's the hook right there. It says, oh, you did all that, and you checked off none of it. And then he said the hook, well, you were depressed while you got shot, or like your friend was depressed while you got shot, or you were depressed because your friend died. And they're like, oh, nope. Or like, like they could say like, oh, that person died and they meant something to you. And they're like, yeah. That's kind of like an ironic look, or like, you say, oh, yeah, I'm depressed. But you wouldn't say it like that. You'd say like, no, I'm not depressed. So, I mean, the polite thing, with substance abuse counselors saying like, your anxiety, you have dual issues. I mean, would that necessarily fit? Probably not. I mean, it wouldn't go for a federal agent. It wouldn't go for a judge. It wouldn't go for a chief of the Navy. It wouldn't go for a police officer or normal police officer. It wouldn't go for a teacher. Shout out to the teachers out there. It wouldn't go for certain things, certain people. And we would think a musician would be one of those people that says, yeah, I don't think it goes with the musician, but then you'd be kind of wrong and say, no, it goes with the musician. And you're kind of like, oh, why would that go with the musician? Well, because there's no fair choice or honest choice in ethic. Because in security's mind, liability is not federal. And that's the answer to that. Federal, governance can, control or relate to certain things, but it is the only opposing answer to the national crisis, which is a domestic one, unless it is a international one. So, in a relationship, there is a yeah, but no, but I don't owe you anything, and I didn't say anything wrong, or I have all my files and work, and I've lived here since I was a child, and it was not sealed. But the relationship there is also you're looking at somebody who's unaware of their, let's say, ephemeral adoption in court for being an assisted adoption, right? So that's one question we have never answered. Can your DNA be falsified? According to federal records and data, CODIS cannot be that. But according to some databases back in the day, it could be. But according to data today, if you look at the federal database, they cannot. So there is a surrounding part of the situation that is sociological and cultural. So there is a unbalanced or unworked ethic there. It might be, the creator of or the founder of DNA. It might be the coded structure itself. It might be the relationship behind setting of the DNA and then behind, whatever relationship there is. But it is an uneven, relationship that says, there's a few there, maybe. But there's also a relationship that says, one person had the sticking, idea to do certain things. One might say, hey, no, there's a relationship that's completely different. And this relationship has been whatever, or, basically there has been some sort of problem. And no one knows what a problem is, but relationship seems to be stereotyped. And what do we know about stereotypes? It is traditionally a sticking ground. So, like, if you ask, one example that said money is money and you can't create money, but all money is negative, it wouldn't really have to do with it, right? But if you look at an example saying, all cancers are the same, all cancers are reasonable and then share a relationship because of such and such and such, is it okay? Or such and such has no other reason to do something, so I believe them as a police officer. Or you say their blood is this type of genome or this type of that, or this person has drinking and they showed up negative, or they had this much drugs and they showed up negative or something like that. The relationship does correlate some. So the relationship there is like basically looking at dry blood. You're looking at, basic necessities of certain things versus something else. I mean, you look under a microscope, you can't find a 100-degree platform that's really going to tell you this or that. I'm pretty sure. I mean, you can check into it maybe. But then, you could look at a spectrometer that's like digital in a way. Would it show you why is it so private then? Why is the information so private? So, no, the potential is no. But we're looking at like a whole different world now that has been not human loss, as they put it, not human cleanliness. You're looking at a whole different function of philosophy there. Maybe a new chemical on Earth, maybe a new atom. So, I mean, back in the day, you could not prove this, but nowadays you can prove anything because there's so much digitalization. It's like AI has erased DNA, basically. So, it's a question all by itself. Can you be right at something that's good but has been gone away? I don't know. Can you hook two soda pop bottles together forever, expect it to change? I mean, the answer is kind of, yeah. I mean, don't hook it up for no reason, but you can hook it up for some reason. So you have to go back to the building blocks again. And you have to go say, oh, this is why this is happening. But, there was an action this time, or there was no action this time, or there was a supportive mean. So there you go again. So let's go to the next question here. Should get breaks? Obviously, they should get breaks. Can one wrong be made up for through human work or human interaction? Supportive means supportive ideas, right, or supportive balances, right? So that's kind of like looking at the DREAM Act in California and looking at the talk for teachers, right? If you can be made up for human work or human interaction, or kind of asking like AI, can I human interact and say, like, I wrote this through human interaction for mass shooting casualties in AI? Well, there's a relationship there. Then they say, no, that's unethical. You're making a computer do it for you, I guess. But the policy there is, can you make up for human work or human interaction? Probably it's not necessary. Like a crime scene, analyst probably has to treat it differently. And there probably is a difference between the collective response and the collective need. But at the same, you get paid money. Capital, however, though, is human interaction that is made for means. That means has been proven in like Marxian theory, capitalist, theory, whatever you want to call it, game theory itself, is an exchange. but the need for that means is always self. It's a self-report, account. So one can be made up for human work for interaction is just kind of a novice way of saying you only have so much. You have choice, you have hope, you have support, you have need. Can you make it up through human interaction? That's a question, right? I mean, if its parallel is looking at mass shooting casualty, can you count it? Yeah. Can you keep on counting it? Yeah. Can you just count the idea of it? Yeah, but it's just time based. If you look at the made up for human interaction or human work or human interaction over time, maybe. But otherwise, volunteerism, putting choice and honest words together. But then, once you see what you've seen, right, people die, and that's not normal. Looking at time itself, right? So when you look at time itself, you go back to the world wars, right? You look at the novice choice or the relational choice behind how to stay alive, how to keep order, how to save order, but no one else believes in it, right? No Hollywood actor believes in it until they can make money. No relationship or choice will bring it to a safe bring it to a safe reason to exist unless it's a social order. Correct. If you can't have a choice, you have no social order. I'd say every single philosophy student has proven this before classicism, right? But it's not talked about. It's now that choice is social order. And look where it's gotten us. The world wars. You look at math. They believe that $1 equals less than $1, like the Nazis. They believe that social choice is order because it creates a reason, and there's only one unity. Does social choice in one order equal two reasons in social choice in order? No. It means you clean up the problem, basically. But social choice in order that is nonsense, the anti-opposing antithesis, the Zarathustra's, they might say, hey, social order is not an exact science, but it's an elusive humor for the irony of sorts. That social choice of order is bad? Is it good? Is it good to kill a cow? Is it good to bring up the idea of being unjust toward your child by not feeding it meat? You see how I'm going? The policy is just because one is not strong doesn't mean that the other is not strong. Right? The social choice of the matter would be, look at everything that has multiplied. Right? There's no social order in that except maybe maggots. Cell growth, but it's still not exponential perfect, is it? No. You might say bone marrow is the reason, or something deep down is the reason for exponential gain, but maybe not. But look at the opposite. You're looking at not the count level. You're looking at, maybe the weight matter. This is the weight here, and then this is the weight here. So what happens? You take this social order of, how heavy the Earth is, maybe a new skill level, and then you look at, something like this is the multiplication effort of all things. You take the square root of them, and then you add them together. And then what's the problem there? I mean, you could have too much that overclocks the other one, or doesn't. And that's perfectly what you're saying. You're trying to find an even center ground, just like you normally should find a center ground for anything, because no one said, hey, the weight is over. They said, oh, no, you got to do the right thing, right? But you got to do it the opposing direction. You're finding a reason to do something, not fine tuning it necessarily. I mean, it doesn't mean there's not dead in the underground, right? As maybe Frederick Nietzsche would kind of look at Dostoevsky. Were they alive at the time? Who knows? Or Edgar Allan Poe. It's in the underground. But the reality there is choice. It's ethic. Questionable, right? Social work has turned this around. Social ethic has turned this around. Social welfare has turned this around. Without these principles, you don't have bread. You don't have choice. So what if it's a constability? If it's a reason, it's a niceness, not classes. What is it? Is it democracy? Is it freedom of choice? Is it a supportive reason? Can the AI answer before the human stays centered and balanced and says, yes, democracy is the right of way? Or no, conclusive sociology or a supportive communication or communism or a socialism is the right thing to do. And it's the most believable, right? It doesn't mean necessarily one city is one city according to the computer, maybe. But the computer also says, yes, the city is the city. And yes, I'm also wrong about the city, maybe. Right. So the relationship there is kind of like, this computer is so smart in a way. And I'm not the one figuring it out. I'm the one giving a lecture here. I'm the one in front of the camera, in front of the computer. But the relationship still shares, the question of what does the computer think about altitude? What does the computer think about a lot? What does the computer think about digits under hand? About senses you can feel and hear or think? What does the computer think about smart drugs? About drugs that deplete poisons? So the computer hasn't been addicted to sugar for some time. I mean, there's many ways of saying, computer, you don't have a reason to live, right? But as a human, you're not going to really modestly make a lot of money inventing sugar for a computer. I think, but the principle still stays the same, mostly. So let's go into the next question. Humans can sort of make up for work, but can't always, unless it's unethical. They should just not. Should they be able to have better technology than others, the victims in the situation? They should. Yes. No. They should have the same technology. They should have the same reasons. They should have the same mentality. So any group or hack upon them, there should be even playing ground along with anyone else. What do you say to that? You say every technology is the same as everybody else, and everyone else should have a consensual reason to say, yes, I consent to the democracy. I consent to the Constitution. I consent to the belief I can even put my hand in the Bible and even think, no, in my head. I can consent to anything, or I can consent to yes to everything I believe in. And I don't trust, I don't not believe in everything I've been told, and I don't believe in everything. I raise my hand and say, I consent, or I say, I swear to the solemn, Constitution or I protect this United States, right? What would bring a difference between the necessity of that and then the non-necessity of it? There's an open question. There's a closed question. There is a revelation there of what technology belongs to one person, one technology belongs to the other person, but it doesn't really necessarily mean, hey, this technology is foreign, this technology is unnecessary, this technology is unreasonable. There's just a few of them. This technology is deadly. This technology is, what's the other words? Embarrassing. This technology is closed. This technology is secure. I would say there's a huge jump there. So not the underground anymore, in a way, according to the definition. You're looking at something else. Classicism is the security of the closet real? Yes, absolutely. But you'd have to read about it. And has it ever been written about? Yes, absolutely. But has it ever been in grammar today? Yes, but not in the Western world, not in the traditional sense of the capitalist or ego-capitalist, as they put it, realism or centurianism. Right? We have the reality principle of the Western Hemisphere, and we have the not. Right? We have the opposing question. We have the opposite. We have the ropes. We have the scale. We have the meat. We have the reason to skyrocket, to do good as people. No. We have the dead and murdered. We have the brought apart from the human existence. When you write capital punishment, or what is the book by Frederick Dostoevsky? It's Crime and Punishment. It's a play on words. Dead, murdered, and dead. You turn over the head, turn over the leaf, you turn over the hair. So when you believe in one thing, you turn the leaf as though it is a responsibility to make another, just like a system, an application, an appropriation, a nicety, just kind of like your vision would be, just kind of like your way to, your sugars are. You're creating a reason, a symbol, an ethic. You're doing something a normal person would do, but you're not living in the 1500s. You're not living in the 1600s. You're not living in the 1700s. You're living now, right? So you are living in a enterprise in a way. People have invested businesses, and this is the way it is. It's turned of events. People have forgotten certain statements. They were hungry, and this is where we are now. I think, or we didn't believe in the absolutism of math. When did the positive sign come out? Was it 1700s, 1800s, 1600s? So, there is a tradition there. It says, I can do everything negative. I can be right about everything. Yeah. I can do everything positive. It's new. Yeah. Or I can multiply. And I could go, by itself. Yeah. I mean, for one, when I hear that, I think rapist. Rapist right away. That man sounds like a rapist. He's tricking that one right now, and he's a rapist. Or, he's a mass murderer. Or he's a... what's the other word? He's a serial killer, or the better word, like Jack the Ripper. He's one of them. Or the other one, because I don't want to get whooped out. There's the other one. He's a man, or I mean, not the man. That's pretty old school. He's a hitman, or he's the lady crossed in dress, or he's a salutatory, right? That's the bigger word. One cuff, please. One quote line of the quotes, right? You say, oh, he's a signatory. He's the one who controls the other people. He's the new age slave owner. And I would say, yeah, I mostly agree. The man with the hydrogen peroxide is the new age slave owner. And say, no, but yeah, but no, but yeah. But yeah, thinking skills aside, America has a silver plateau of save silver. And it's sea law now through bargaining, obviously, and attention. If we go to slavery, we're going to those. And if we go into, yield capital market, gold. There we go, gold. When we go yield capital market, silver strong, and then the egro, corn, getting a little the hydrogen peroxide. But when you go into the battling, what they consider, the bad food, poison, the stuff, you're in a heat. You're in a hot one, right? So, yeah, when you're the one in and out, yeah. But when you're not, right? So, I mean, the principle of the policy, you plot your line and you can keep on going, or you can go say, hey, I told you so. And, there was a reason for all of it. And it's not fair to take away peace when exactly the moment I wanted peace. And well, yeah, first I acquitted you on slavery. Secondly, I acquitted you on being a bad person who did bad things like a murderer or a mass murderer. Or three, I acquitted you on, your drug usage, or, acquitted you on is something else. But think about it, yeah. So, I mean, if you're pretentious enough to be more than a murderer, do you think you should be a murderer who just got away with it, or a murderer who did something else? I mean, you're kind of what they consider a generalist, an ordinary back in the South. You're asleep. You look at something like modern age, it might be, of course, there's the drugs still, what we see. And then there's kind of the murder aspect, like you see. And it's not just going to cut you out of the deal. They're going to say you're not a body stealer. And that's not who you are, but you are, you're figuratively, you're within the region of support that makes it so enticing, but still real. It's the one away strategy, right? But it's not just a one away strategy. It's we got everything we need here kind of thing. So let's go to the next question here. I believe the fifth, obviously. Should they be able to have better? Oh, we already answered that one. Should they be able to speed things up or slow them down? No. They should be able to do whatever they want, with the premise in mind that they'd like, right? The premise is speed things up, slow them down. Words are salads. Remember that. Words are salads. There's a reason for premise, habit, solicitation, and they're all words, modern texts. We say speed things up, loosen them, right? Speed things up, show them. Speed things up, not overdo them, not slow them down, not that, but you're speeding things up because they are a choice. You are choosing to speed things up. They're a choice. We say choice, we say, I chose my hand here. I chose it to go very fast. Very fast. It's very fast. It's a fast test. Should we speed things up with this frequency, sir? It's fast. Very fast. How many beats? I don't know. It's a 440, so maybe you can look it up real quick. But when you look at slow them down, how do you slow things down? Do you mallet them? I mean, do slow things work with gravity? Yes, slow things work with gravity. What about hardening things with slow things? Same thing. But what other ways can you put slow things down? You slow time down. Do you have more control and knowledge? Do you understand and think more? Do you think more even though you can't relate it to anybody and it kind of just slopes down over time? Or just kind of drops down and goes? As the moment would go, as the same exact time would be proven wrong, would it slow down like that? Or does it go the opposite way and it's kind of like a fake graph? Or does it kind of like you slow things down and go, ooh? Or does it go up and like go, ooh, ooh? Or does it go speed and then slow things? Because, well, then maybe they could do that too. They can kind of go, okay, hold on. And then they quickly grab the gun from the mass shooter and then they go, no, and then they shoot him. Or, they go, slow down, brother. And they pat him and they said, yes, I don't know why you're here right now. And I would like to know some answers about who you are. Are you here to save our lives? And then just trick them with some fast speech. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways you could use fast and slow, right? Or you could say, hey, is this slow enough for you? Because I'm pretty fast. Is that a bad way to do it? Or is it kind of like, oh, I'm a slow handshaker. Nice to meet you, brother. Can I sweeten this deal for you, brother? I got some chocolate pudding in the back. I mean, there's many ways to be obstructive or on relationship or share no relationship, right? You're using a figurative speech, a figurative moment still. You're using a lexicon, yeah, or a lexicon, yeah, or you're using a way to find a novus choice, a social order, a mean, a need, a hurt sound, if you will. Does it mean it's slow when you hear slow? Or does it mean when you're fast, you hear fast, right? There's a principle behind, what you can see, what you can hear, what you can do, what you can feel. Can you tie a shoelace and say, my lace has been tied up? As an adult, is that kind of slow? But what is the reason you have a choice and an action and a need, right? So, I mean, for a person, you might say, hey, I have a choice to be liable for, and that's not a really good reason. I have a choice to stay protected, yeah. I have the choice to go back to work. Maybe I was an ex-FBI agent and the servers got cleared. It was 10 years ago. It wasn't a real long time ago. It was '09, right? Like the sci-fi show, but it's going. Or it's kind of like, oh, it's a new CIA FBI show. I'm like, oh, that doesn't really explain me and who I am. But it says, oh, I'm slow. I slow it down. But as the liability goes, just let it go for a second. Say, okay, collectivize, right? So I'm the one in trouble now. Yeah, if you slowed it all down, you're gonna say, I count now, right? I count, that person, you just get that information, just kind of leave the scene. Are they a spy? Or did that person go and just lie about stealing gold? Or did that person go and lie about driving the car without a license? Or did that person lie about heroin in the food being transported within the boxes? Or did that person expect to get fed, right? Or did that person go to the store, go to the corner mark store, and then go and try to blow up the White House? I mean, just many obscure things you can do with your time that are not thinking skills. You slow it down, you do a head count again. You say, oh yeah, they're doing it again. Or like, they said like, like as a history teacher who's like a generally bad guy, they say like, oh yeah, he's doing it again. Or the student, kind of like, old but young. But or like on a hot day, you come down and your dad's like, yeah, you're doing it again, right? The reality there is your choice. It's figurative. You're gonna have to explain something time in your life, but when you go speeding through and you keep on speeding through everything, and kind of like, whoa, 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 what is gonna happen? Do you think you're gonna drift the same way the slow people in your mind go, or the fast people catching up to you go? Or they're all fast at the same time? How would you learn it? Right. So your reaction says a lot about you. They should be able to do whatever they want, but the relationship there does show you that you speed things up. It might be pluralized, right? If you slow them down, you have a choice, right? It's not a language. It's not a personification. It's not a realize, it's in my DNA sticking. You're slowing it down for a choice. You slow down a lot, but the relationship there again is when people have a settled agreement with their framework, with their mind. There's a reason for that. It's that speed, that necessity, that action, that replies, that response. There's a reason for it. When you slow it down, though, slowly slow it down, there is. It's not just an annoyance. It's not a procedure. It's a what's it called? It's an unsettled mindset in a way. You slow it down, but you don't have a choice. You have a choice, but you have a reason. You slow, you're fast. You're fast, you're slow. So when you have a reason, you have the ability to slow things down, slow things up, and slow things around, right? So with a choice and a reason, there's an action. Action is like a preverb. And an action, like a preverb, is also a choice that is a matter in front of it. You're using your choice of slowing for an action, a preverb, a conjecture, if you will, and then a reason to do something for a reason. You're finding a pre-novice choice, an action, a supportive reason, a cogent surrounding. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do, like such as an adjective would do, but the supportive need or means are about finding a way to do them in a way that is supportive, that makes a means, and then also has a what is considered a reason for existing. Right? If you slowed and spread things up as a mashing victim, what would that mean if you were that confused? I mean, most kids nowadays think, they were on energy drinks and are paranoid. As adults think they're paranoid. And then, as people go, they think, I ate poison today, or I don't know. They have a grudge against things that are normal. So we have normal and have abnormal thought there. So there's a quick relationship between there. And I think as normal people would go, they speed things up. They slow it down. But the relationship there is also not normal because, you look at something like a mass shooter. And you go and you ask a mass shooter, like, you can't really ask when you say, like, why didn't you speed things up and slow things down that day? Or why didn't, the mass shooting victim do the same thing? You can't put the blame game with the victim. Not in that scenario. There's not really a reason, they got shot, I think. Existential ego. I mean, that's not a good reason. But when you're looking at, the mass shooter, why didn't you slow things down and speed them up at the right time? I mean, did you, kidnap somebody, do something really bad or something, and then, go and become a mass shooter or something? Or what were you trying to accomplish when you did all these things? They just don't make sense to me. I mean, the amount of dead now is beyond recognition. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's so crazy. It's an obscure thought that is on the mindset of kids today, and it's so crazy. It's abnormal. It's freaking people out, and they don't have no choice. But then, again, they don't know how to get food. They don't know how to work. So you're going to say, these seem connected if they are on a dump map that just had no reason to begin with, right? So the choice is the action, choice is the order. Let me clean up this water spill real quick. Hopefully my computer doesn't crash. Hopefully. It's a mess, so maybe it just won't crash. But the relationship there is a choice that is, holy crap, there's a social order on a whole different level than it ever was or ever will be again and again forever, really, basically. That's the bigger thing. But social order, as people know it, are again based on familiar surroundings, kind of like the exponential need again, or the reason to create a focus between something that might be real, that might not be real, but that has a overall, and maybe just an estimation towards it, a idea behind something, kind of like a quick fix or DIY, again, that we're talking about. So, I mean, the principle again is a reality in the choice of words, conduct, ethic, effort. Effort is a pretty big word there as well, as we go into the liability of things. We go into the reality of choice, and then concern or the interest of support. Normal things that a normal person would do. Or that is so supportive in a way that it has a choice all of its own. So that support choice is pretty much an important necessity behind certain things. Okay, so it doesn't look like it was too white here. Let me share my screen one more time here. And we're almost done with this live here. Now, obviously, it's more research based now. But it does, tell you, what might be wrong in the world today, right? But just not kept as a secret. So let's go. Oh yeah, we're almost done. Should they be able to use legal drugs? What about illegal ones? And what about treatment? Well, I would think mostly what you do with your body is mostly your choice. Maybe not as a federal agent, obviously, because you go to probably prison if you're using drugs. But the relationship there is also about time spent, money and effort and ethic. If you were in a mass casualty situation overseas or in some sort of situation, and the only clotting factor was cigarettes, you might find cigarettes. But if you find your relationship with aspirin, which really bleeds the blood out real fast, is a good way to coagulate blood, you'd be wrong. Same as for Tylenol and aspirin, and the other stuff, sodium. It's all not going to help. Relationship is fatty foods, cigarettes, and sometimes alcohol will weirdly clot blood. But the factor there with alcohol is that it's major clots. Major, like you're not looking at a single clot anymore. You're looking at just major clots, like just clots in your brain, clots all over the place. Alcohol is a time spender that will kill your brain cells over time. It'll kill your liver, kill everything in your body. There's no cure for alcohol except what they say: food, sodium in the food, basically. Take sodium. I think one of the false ex-professors, he made a video about, I'm just kidding, a physics guy made a professional video where he took salt and alcohol, he put it in a bottle, shook it up, and then the salt reduced all of the alcohol lifted up from the salt, basically. It's kind of like we're throwing it up. So let's go into the next question there of not slowing things down or speeding them up. Obviously, should they be able to use legal drugs? Obviously, legal drugs are legal drugs. Illegal drugs are illegal drugs. Doesn't mean the end of the world, but I mean, in the government eyes, they'll say, yeah, you probably need some sort of relationship with mental health help, substance abuse help. Doesn't mean mental health. It just means substance abuse. Just kind of like anything else. Anyone at any time can leave a program and kind of figure things out themselves, like a normal person. Yeah. Some people say I'm too honest. Some people say I'm too nice. Some people say I'm an idiot, and some people, want to drink my blood or something. Like I don't know. So let's go on to the next question here. Should they only hold secure communications or be within secure communications, or perhaps only visit secure spots, sites? Um, Kind of like the meeting place thing. The more you do it, the more conceptualized it becomes. And conceptualized meaning bad, evil, horrible, unnecessary. When you're charting something, you're charting something. When you're finding a way to meet about something that has no idea in it, that's what it is. When you're looking at secure communications, however, it might be a blessing in disguise if you can see it. Can you see that you have a security clearance? Can you see that you have the secure communications? Can you see that perhaps that these are secure ideas? Yeah, no, but then words are words, and then the words are not word salads, but words are words, and words are more secure than any technology will be. So I think secure communications, yeah, but then the honest truth, that's a message away, and it always will be. So, you know, what is exclusively a database to some guy who's in his 30s and homeless compared to like idea that is meta thought or the realized expectations of you as a human. I mean, there's not really a choice in the matter. They're kind of like expectations your child would have to think or like you grow or expectation to be fine too. When you ask these questions, it does beg the question if you are human or human error, or if you are realized as like kind of like submissive. Like you're basically saying like you are not counted as a person. It's kind of like saying a child is like not counted as a mass grave, right? If there's a child, I mean, down in your heart, somewhere in your heart, you would say like there's no variable name for a child. There's a mass grave for adults. It's like they belong to the army. There's no kids that say they just belong to school. It doesn't work that way. You are required to do that. Kind of like you're required to like belong to whatever. I mean, maybe deep down inside you're belonging to the treehouse, or you're belonging to something else, right? It might mean evil things to certain people. I might think they're evil, and somebody else might say, "Hey, no, they're not evil, but it sounds nice," and then that might be like me, or might not be like me. But then they might also say like, "Yeah, they're so evil, don't talk to them. Or they're fucking like they actually did something very, very bad. And they're the murderers here." So I mean, it's like it's like taking the dead cat on the table, or in this instance, like taking a sword and slamming it on the family table, and just like being evil, right? So I mean, it's not really going to get anywhere. That's just the way it is. Um, so the next question here is what sets them apart having basic information like a bank would. What does that mean? It means like for a person to have basic information, you're kind of looking at not the money, so to speak. Like you're not going to like toss 100 at them and say, "Oh, it's 100. Go and break it down for me." No, you're kind of like looking at like what keeps everything secure, basically, right? The other episode we kind of like covered. What was it like, if you were counted as a asset situation, like a business owner would be? And relatably, you're kind of in the midst of a jumble there of money and way too much ways to spend it, or you're on like kind of like a lower tail or even, just depending on the nature. Um, so I mean, the basic information there is basic. Like you have to keep steady a way to do it like a bank would be. But there's a relationship because the bank, says just because you don't want a business, just because you're not a sole proprietor, just because you weren't a student at the time, doesn't necessarily mean you never held money before. I mean, in the eyes of the world of slave owners, were you a piece of property? Were you a worker for $0 to earn your interest, or $0 to be a slave? So that's the other perception. And I mean, if you haven't woken up to the idea of like slave money, maybe you should. Maybe you should really start to think about these social politics or social ethics. And economics and game theory. If you're a slave theory, I mean, you might slave, owner or idea of owning false money. It's absolutely not. It's a precaution. It's a cost. It's so much you would have to reinvent the game theory and prove yourself wrong. And that's the actualization or digitalization behind game theory, which is right. But the basic mainframe or structure says nothing can be disproven, right? So game theory is not going to be disproven just because it's disproven. It's going to be more basic over time, right? Just kind of like, PW is just kind of like slavery. I mean, you're looking at, individualization that has been around for years and ages, that are your forefathers or whatever you want to call them, were insane. Basically, that's what they believed in a way. And I guess we're crossing tones when we say indentured and not indentured. We're not with reality, basically. We're finding a reality behind a relationship, and the relationship behind and going back in time, basically. So the relationship there is basic, but it creates a more basic reason to create something normal, basically, because you don't keep on representing the word basic as the word, slave. You don't keep on representing the word slave. It's just kind of like one of those forgotten textbook theories, right? That, whoever John is didn't forget to put in. So let's go to the next question here. Why is everything too secure, as though someone with the spotlight may do a much better job with no experience or acts suspect because they ignore or do not relate actualized information? Let's read that whole thing again. Why is everything too secure, as though someone with the spotlight may do a much better job with no experience or acts suspect because they ignore or do not relate to actualized information? I think that's pretty basic or normal. When you're looking at the system, you don't have access to normal things. When you look at a civilian, you have access to normal things that are not anything to them. They don't have a way to look at them. They have a way to, look at, what they don't have. Basically, there is not a normal point behind that jumping point. And it might seem precautionist. It might seem criminal. It might seem insane. And I would say, yeah, I mean, there is no reason a person can't, evolve or, relate to that. And that's another principle of New Age theory. You are explaining New Age theory again. And if you can find another principle besides New Age theory, like game theory is, the principle is about, a group classist mindset. You're finding a way to find privilege, establishment, finding a way to support new aims and causes. Same as, slave owners, same as freedom owners, as you put it, or same as, support workers, right? You're finding a way to revolutionize, evolution in a way. New Age, kind of like, Columbus, New Age theory. And it might have a different name to it. But typically, New Age theory is same as its identity, right? So that is the central premise of sociology. That's a central premise of psychology. That is the central premise of law today. And now, who came up with those ideas? J.D. Vance actually says central premise of law is established law, right? So the value there is something he has even agreed with. He has made a sticking thumb of his career to get to where he is today. So the central premise, might have changed, in his, as well as someone like, the eyes of Wells would say, some sort of philosophical stone or your relationship with, folklore. But, that actualized information is interpreted. So there's a central premise to everything. And that's what matters, or the promise or the central representation is not the ego, as the drunk man would say. It's it's a priority. It's the support behind something surprising, something that's an act, and then something that's a reason and a cause, right? So a just or unjust civilization is never a just reason or a just reason to create an opposition, right? So it's kind of like, playing Civilization, finding it's a stage in the game, and then finding the new theme in life. Kind of like, what will else it do? Or, existence behind someone with exquisite knowledge in someone like, Edgar Allan Poe or Horse Story, or, somebody who reads Spotlight Attention a lot in articles and says, this is what this person believed in. And, they believed in this and they believed in that, but they didn't really give any information away of how to do anything or how to find, the real way to do anything at all. There's not a reason. But if everything was too secure and someone was in the spotlight and they had a much way better to do their job and acted suspect because they ignored or do not like to actualize information. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like stealing cash, or like kind of like saying, um, mm, would it be like stealing cash? Would it be like the actualization of not stealing cash? So, I mean, it's a bitter question to answer, because I mean, on one side of the matter, you say you're on Social Security, hey, everything is too secure. Everything in the spotlight may do a better job at certain things, or act suspect. Um, Sometimes, because they ignore or do not like to actualize. And the same for, they act suspect when they're out of the herp mentality for a bunch of people who might be in a different generation compared to somebody else. And it becomes uh, serendipitous. It becomes a need of civilization to do what people are saying, or they're going to do it, right? Old versus young, right? So, I mean, yeah, but I mean, if you're looking at it as an ego or a will, why is everything too secure? As if someone with the spotlight may do a much better job with no experience or act suspect because they ignore or do not relate actualized information. Yeah, that's too open ended of a question, even though you might think it yourself. Why is everything too secure? Has a spotlight, so it's like objective. It has a reason to be in the main stream, or I don't know what it would be besides mainstream. Maybe the orchestration. I don't think it would be that either. A much better job with no experience or ex suspect. Much better job, no experience or ex suspect. I mean, suspect not doing their job correct at all. I mean, yeah. I mean, but then if you're doing your job right with no experience and ex suspect, what's the point? I mean, and you're asking if they're too secure, as though someone with the spotlight may do a much better, or as though someone with the spotlight may do a much better job with no experience or act suspect because they ignore or do not like to actualize information. Okay. That's a good question, actually. So, I mean, if you're pertaining that to like a timeline of now as once and then's, that's pretty easy, you would say, because not all of these things are rationalized in someone's mind. One, just because one person quit one job one day doesn't mean the rationalization quit the other day, right? So there's a big matrix there, and I mean, it might go down to the letter A, right, or accessory or accessibility, right? Relationship there shows there is there's a pretty big relationship that says not ignore, but they don't relate to the actualized information because it's not in their scenario at all. There's nothing that says it's relationship. It shows a relationship, but it does ask you, say, why though. Why is everything, and it's too open ended, as you would say. But then, no, it's because it is too secure. And you're asking why it's not secure, as though someone with the spotlight may do a much better job, though. Like a teacher might, or obviously it wouldn't be a teacher because this job would have to do with mashing. But again, awareness, there's nothing wrong with it. The actualization would have to do with the main frame, or the point of the computing, or the actualization of effort to do something. Because I think when you break it down to the loose side of things, you just lose support for something, or there's a functional opportunity to do something, you just don't have a relationship to do. I think the why of everything is too secure, or there's some sort of basic spotlight with no experience. I think there's a general analogy that we're looking at right now that says if you acted suspect, it might be because the relationship is just opposed. Imagine being a programmer or looking through a computer nowadays. I mean, back in the day, that might have been programming code that's not working, but relationship, if somebody could see you that you don't see, is there an actual grammar for that choice, or is there a relationship for the grammar? Same as like a computer, what can they tap or wiretap your computer for no apparent reason, saying, "Hey, this is that and that and this," but this guy on the street, he created mass casualty, and they went and did it, or the next guy, next guy, next guy did it, and you're looking at asking, if there's no grammar, there's no choice, but this guy didn't really care too much, and he came up with the idea to spy on regular people. Hey, you sound like a spy. I mean, you would sound like a spy pretty much, but if you didn't do things in general, but you had the idea to do them, you have to say, would you act suspect to do that? I mean, the whole point would not to be act suspect at all. You'd be very generalized or be very normal within the spotlight, obviously. Spotlight with no matter what. In the shadows, I mean, there's always the shadows with the spotlight. Always. Your counselor's always in the shadows. So why is everything too secure? I mean, why is everything too secure? Is it just because it is too secure? I mean, you being a law-abiding citizen, you're protecting your human rights for self-defense. That's too secure, absolutely. It's not normal as like an abridged kind of way of thinking things like through on the spectrum. I mean, I suppose everything has a spectrum, so yes, that's hard for me to believe even. But the spectrum, it could be earth colors, brown, green, and blue, or brown, green, and blue, and that's all like basically military. I mean, there's no breaking part in these ideas, right? You'd have to find a way to do them. In a better world, it'd be nice, but still, you'd still have to keep it because it is a point and choice of sanity. Why is everything too secure? As though someone with a spotlight may do a better job with no experience or act suspect, though. Or act suspect. I mean, they have a reason to do so. May do it much better with no experience or act suspect. I mean, you act suspect because there's a reason to do it. I don't really follow that one as like a SEAL team member saying like ignore this, or like well, we were undercover and we related to it. We got sued by the government. I mean, that's kind of acting suspect in a way. You say it's good for one thing, but then do you hear the whole story? What the government saying? Is there a reason for the story? I would say yeah, there's a reason for the story. That's to keep people protected, but there's no one to tell the story. This is just like anybody else. It's protected for certain reasons. I would say so. I would say most things are protected for certain reasons that are there for a reason, right? To protect certain things. You just have to find a way to think normal thoughts, I think. And the spectrum or the idea of what, though, is a better question. Why is everything too secure? As why someone with the spotlight why do a better job than why experience act suspect, or why they act suspect because they ignore or to actualize information. Then I think you have the answer there because they don't relate to actualize information. Or they actually, I mean, that's just a bitter question, right? To secure, as though someone with this spotlight may do a much better job with no experience or I mean, that's just umbrella. It's like Morse code. So like da 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 da. It's a competition at the most. So I don't know. I mean, it brings me to the question here, but does it make me make the choice of the question? Not really. Actually, as information, act suspect, ignore, better job with no experience, spotlight, too secure. It just makes me feel like that person would probably be a murderer or a Nazi or a killer, basically. I mean, when I think about that, I think a spy. I think automatically somebody spying on the United States, doing bad things, ignoring something like that, doing all that. No experience. I mean, that doesn't really necessarily mean anything. It just says you're saying you're acting suspect. Act suspect. I mean, you're doing weird things. You're ignoring things. You're in the spotlight, ignoring things. You're lying about the spotlight, ignoring things. You're too secure about being in the spotlight, ignoring things, about the reason in which you ignore them, and then do not relate to actualized information. Actualized, I mean, like real information. I think it's been kind of written from the books as actualized information is too forbidden, but I mean, that's a time for another conversation. Or you realize, like, narrative theory. I mean, there's plenty of reasons actualized information would not be fitting. But there are plenty of reasons, support systems say, now is there a reason for life or death? It's a very good question, right? I mean, finding a name is simple as finding a name, but finding a judgment takes a history, it takes a background check, and that's what background checks are for. So there's another question of background checks, right? Realizing effort doesn't necessarily mean that the background check is good or bad. It just means there's a realized effort, and that realized effort could have stopped at any time. It takes maybe money, it takes realization of effort, and not always effort and realization of money, because a lot of people just don't do it at all. They just kind of are there for people. So, it is a good question, but you have to find a starting point somewhere. I think that's the bigger question, not just maybe a question of why, but maybe a starting point of where. And that's a bigger question, even though the novice choice is that. But the reaction there says, everybody makes mistakes. They usually have a blank board to do things. They just have to find a way. But the bigger question is, how or why would you be involved with a system that is kind of that a choice that's kind of neglectic in a way. But it does kind of also point to social patterns and orders that are kind of isolated, kind of like a terrorist group member or somebody who is a spy, right? I mean, if you were a counselor or a social worker and you're kind of like ignoring the ideas of a mass shooting, and you're kind of saying I'll bring it to the spotlight, but the relationship is also acting suspect around certain ideas or needs, or finding you must ignore actualized information. I'd say like there's a premise behind it, yeah, but the relationship at the same time says the premise is not collectivized, right? I mean, the point is to have an A plus at all times, because the A plus is mostly necessary at all times. I mean, if you didn't check out the idea about what that is for that, you'd have to say, yeah, absolutely. Machine victim should always, get a standard A for being normal, no matter what. I mean, if it was not then it would have to be like 2 days from then, I guess, and just be out scot free. And there's no reason a mass shooting victim should be able to be coincidental with the idea of being an IU forever. It just doesn't work that way at all. The relationship, just because you say so doesn't mean it's real then. I mean, like the IOU, the one, I mean, you just basically scrap it. I mean, it's a unit like anything else. Scrap the conversation, go on to something new. I would say, but reality of if one is versus the other is better than the other, you're looking at like the state system, the hospital, the federal government. Has this ever been solved before? You're looking at a whole business technique and concept. I mean, put someone out of business is the American spirit, right? Not die is also the American spirit, and also they realize effort between humans is also real, but their realization is day or night. You do it in the morning, you do it in the day, you do it in the afternoon. But now, have you ever heard of it, or have you heard of an extension of fear, right? So I mean, when you think of extension of fear, mass shooting one, mass shooting. I mean, there's a lot of nonsense behind it. And you look at the daylight savings hour. I mean, not really a factor. Look at the weekends, a factor. Hold up behind the weekend, the weekday. Not really a factor. Real organizational charting, not really. But I mean, the reality there is, kind of, so you speak a different language. So what? You didn't get an A. So what? You're a professor of psychology. So what? I mean, you're a police officer, so what? But the reality there stays pretty much the same. I mean, you divide, you multiply, you exponentiate, like the realized, effort. You create a divisible, exponent, or, you create one that is a square root. I mean, there's no real thing behind your social matter. You're creating a social matter, but the social matter is your idea about making and breaking down things that are multiplied over and over again. The number doesn't equal self unless you can kind of represent some sort of idea that is real too secure. I mean, you're thinking exponential, theory, in fact, is too secure, and that the multiplication spotlight is real, and then you're finding the idea that is antithesis, as though it's not real, like the plus sign isn't invented in 400 years ago. I mean, I don't know. I mean, and then you look at, say, like, act suspect, or because they ignored actualized information. I mean, you're kind of like talking like a kid, saying like everything is real. Like, my book, it's just different. I mean, you can go look at basic normal math, but you're still paranoid quack, or like you're a paranoid, whoever, right? So Doesn't mean normally normal people act and think this way. I mean, you can prove it on paper that that's normal behavior, but that doesn't really have to do with real ideas, which is counting normal things. You go 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, and you might want to add a plus on the beginning or the end, but you just add it once. That's all it is. You're not going to ever add anything else. It's just cost effective to use zeros. This is what people have agreed with for centuries, and that's what has developed the technology. But exponential features and numbers haven't really taken off ever. They're just seclusive. They cost money. They're damning. They disprove evidence. I mean, there's plenty of things. And when I say disprove evidence, I mean they're just kind of they're ideas that you go with on a nudge. They're a grudge. I mean, there's a lot of ways to put it. This waste of space. You're just going to end up doing it again. So let's go into the last question here. What if the judge gets it wrong and refuses to let things go, however, are proven some other place, or it has to do with corruption? Sure to awful kind of go look at the exponential stick if I have it. Oh, it's right here. Kind of going neon, but I'm just joking. But you kind of hit it. I'm going to go, this is the frequency again. The choice is the choice. So, once something, corrupt happens, so something corrupt happens and, people don't let go of corrupt things. Absolute corruption is absolutely corruption no matter what. Or absolute corruption is absolute corruption. I don't know. How else would you put that? But set that aside for a second. The court of law is the court of law, and they will separate all facts and all ideas forever. Right? They'll spell it out. They'll say mass shooting, MASS dash shooting, SHOOTINGS. And do I put periods in between that? No, I don't. All right. So the reality there is, what if the judge gets it wrong and refuses to let things go? They proceed and say, okay, no, I don't want to do that today. Or let me bang my soft gallet on my $100 bill and say, no, don't do that again. Or I don't have a reason for that, and it won't be today. Let me add a bottle cap water and the system, and we don't need to recycle everything right now, but we'll do everything better. No, you get down. You do something different. No blank key for you today. Screw you. Not exactly. And then the melancholy people come in. I fixed the solution today, and I have the principle. No, but we have stolen funds. So the idea is, the judge, mostly the judge gets things wrong, refuses to let go. They're in principle maybe the local courts or the federal government. I mean, maybe in this situation for normal ideas. In this situation of normal ideas, they say, oh, I refuse to believe this. You're under house arrest for life until you come up with a solution. Or, in some shady way, you're kind of like, oh, no, you're under probation for life. You spoke up about the MS. Do you think it'd be normal? Maybe in the last episode, we had the moment of silence, but kind of like, yeah. Moment of silence, please. Moment of silence. It's like why we drink to it. It's like why we, get up in the morning. It's like asking a reporter, why do you do your job so much? Why do you want to do your job so much? Or like asking a lawyer, why do you want to do your job so much? A support worker said, why do you want to do your job so much? An advocate saying, why do you want to do your job so much? Maybe recreational users saying, why do you want to use so many drugs? Why are you so depressed, right? Or saying, why do you want to do such a basic thing as that, judge? Why do you want to lie? It's being spoken up, or interrupting no one, going another day and saying, hey, I object to what the judge is saying, and I have to say something, and then it's not just the judge; it's now the security agent or the officer at the courthouse saying, no, you're not going to speak to me like you object to anything. And he goes up to you in person, like, yeah, I believe it. Would you trust them? Would you trust the judge? So, I mean, we went from, counting the mass shooting victims. I mean, it doesn't even matter anymore. It just happened. It's just in your mind one day. You think about it and kind of like, snap in it, snap out. You are in the slow high or the slow fast movement of your heart. It's rushing. The ADF from the Australian military might say you can hear it in your heart. It keeps on thumping. It goes boom, boom, bum, 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 bum. But it's not the broken thumb. You're not biting your thumb. You're not Shakespeare. You're in a courthouse and you believe in sober ideas, or you believe in real ideas. You believe in real needs. A human would believe human emotion, interaction, reality, choice, thought, emotion, safety, the community, a fearless community, a community that is as real as it could be. But when that boom goes in your heart, boom, 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 then there's this whole reason there, right? But choice is yours. Is it really protecting your self identity, right? Would you protect your self identity if you had no other choice, right? I mean, you have a lot there, but you don't have a security clearance for what you need. Maybe it might be the massacre, it might be the shooting, it might be something else related to it, or again and again and again, or it might be the relativity of listen, hearing, of thinking, separating thought, sense, emotion, maybe heat exhaustion, your muscle tone, just like a counselor would, just like a doctor would. Finding a relationship when you heat, suntan. I mean, there's many little urges. As a police officer, you might have to think. A caseworker, you might have to think. You might have to piece things together, one and one and one. It's not my choice to say that goes to. It's not my choice to say, oh, all this is the symptom. It doesn't say, one and one and one. It doesn't say, you did bad thing. You believe in the cloud servers or something. But you do know, when they get things wrong, you keep on hearing the hush, the rud, the rud. Everything that's going on, you can see it, you can hear it, you can feel it. So I mean, you ask yourself, is the judge the murderer? Is the judge the killer? Is the judge, or is Mahan exactly take the fifth and say, is the judge the answer to the killer? Yeah, are the judge the killer? They hid all of that. Are they the killer, or is the perfect heart the killer? Is it the weakest? The killer is the heart, and therefore, the weakest is my my health. Well, I mean, I think most people would say no. Fingers crossed, if you said no or not. But the reality there is, you don't take the hit. You don't take the double hit. You don't take the body hit. You don't take the emotional toll. You don't take, the reason not to get up in the morning and live, right? You always get to live. It's in your head. It's in your heart. It's in the commitment to yourself right there, right? But it does tell you your emotion, is bigger than life. It does tell you, you have a support system that is there for you, but it doesn't make you hold a grudge, but it tells you, yes, I know someone's going to die. I know someone's going to be harmed, but I also know that, deep down inside, it's not that your heart is strong. It's not that you're strong, but that you know how to be fearless. You know how to be professional. You know how to not exact revenge. You know how to be there for someone who is weaker than you. So if you read that statement again, what if the judge gets it wrong and refuses to let things go, however, are proven some other place, or has it proven with corruption? It's the lowest of low. I mean, if that's what you would put it, or your thoughts would put it, it's the highest, right? You're thinking about the commitment, time has put into there, people have put it into there. It's not necessarily like, you've done something subjective as to let go of no evils or let go of no good, right? As a saying, but the realized, temptation there says, if these don't go together, if they're not normal, like a category design, just the way we're meant to think, will they ever? Or should they not ever? Shouldn't there only be a standpoint, a written note somewhere, just goes up the ladder? Here's not my $100, but here's the goodwill of people. I mean, there's no question of it not being wanting to be blank or not. The more pure, the more perfection it is, people would like to have a speech, a conversation, an ethic, a tone, a voice, a concern, a vote, a power that is greater than them to protect the people. Some might call it the ritual. Some people might call it the youth. Some people might call it, humanity. justice, right? But the realized, effort, you might, pertain to animals. You might pertain to the unjust, right? You might pertain to the moment of silence for the just, right? It might be something more and greater, right? It might be more than you have, but the emotion there isn't about um, killing off the memory, breaking down the bad, good. I mean, it's not breaking down the bad, right? You're not breaking down. Oh, you're not breaking down the goods. You're showing emotion and showing spirit, a fortune, right? So people can live. And that's one of the most emotional statements you can give yourself is, you're giving yourself a heart-to-heart talk with something that is maybe villainous, that has no answer, that is, not a machine. But a machine asks that question of a conspirator, of who is a spy, or who is purely calculations in a computer, who has no soul. Is that what you're going to? At the last second, will you bring up the conjecture of a soul? So I think that's one of the last pieces or questions we had tonight. I mean, the question is a blank slate after that. Do you believe in your free will and the just of mind, or do you believe in the free will and the hearts of all? Right. So it's not really a question as it is mean spirited or free spirited, perception in a way. Kind of like a gallant, idea about, you've been tagged, you're worth $100, and basically this is how much you're worth. You're worth 100, and you'll wear that all the time unless you take it off. And well, not exactly. You're not going to take off that one today. So you're going to have to take with it a grain of salt with it. Plus, you'll eat your sugar before the rest of us. Or so, we say you're not going to have any water, or you're not going to have any choice in the matter. You're not going to have a place to live, or you're not going to have a home to count for. So human, versus ethic or effort, one thing, but the potential of falling from the earth or dying or crashing, still not angles. The angle is something, maybe testing, maybe finding a way to point for actualization. How, if you're not safe? How would you point for actualization if you were never safe? Another question for another question, or where are the hands, where are the wrists at? Well, it says, you have a choice in the matter if you have no wrist, or if you have no choice and then you have no wrist. I mean, the question is a timeless age purpose. You cuff, the youngest of whoever, might be, Francis Scott Key. It might be the youngest of Diamond, the drummer from the Revolution. You handcuff him in the guerrilla wars, and then you shoot him with a gun. And you have your first earned slave, and you have your cotton, and you have your money. Or you could think about it in the prejudice of the Civil War. You have your cotton, your slave, and your gin. And then you also have your absolutism. You've been forgiven the state. Or you could think about it as, a well-earned man from World War II or World War One. You have your snot, your scotch, and then your gin, and you're going to do well. Or obviously the World War II. You have your gin, your spirit, and then you have your reaction, and you have a gun. Right? We're living in a modern world. You go back to the Iraq War. You have a hook, and you're done. You have the Iran War. You have a supportive figure, and you're through. So you can see now the ex-president is now, a teacher. Or, the other idea of, the teacher being the ex-president, right? The idea is conclusive, not supportive, non-supportive of identity. It's a supportive of human people. Children are human people. So there's support, there's effort, there's work, there's lies that can be held. I mean, you could count the amount of lies, but there's still, you got the tag on you. It says you're a slave to somebody. Does that make it right or wrong? Does it make it plentiful or joyful? Does it make it refused service, or does it make it a contempt of law? arrest warrant for a judge? Does it make an arrest warrant for a support worker? Does it make an arrest warrant for liability? Can you count the dead still if you never count the dead? I mean, does it have anything to do with it, or is the dead just a past presence, right? But again, when the reality comes to death and murder, or rival gangs, or as we call it, rivalries, in collection English, or Americanized collectio, you find that there's no rivals without support. And that's one of the things in America we believe in as democratic voters, is that we believe in choice of votes, choice of peace, earth, a lot of things. On the other side, they might flip the conversation as it is Confederates. But deep down your heart, that's a bad thing. That Confederates are a bad thing, and also know that it's a bad thing to kill other humans, right? Right. So otherwise, I mean, if you didn't believe in this security, this idea of peace between humans in this way, right? Um, Deep down your heart, it's much more than a civil war, right? It's an infection of your heart, or something else along those lines. So I think that's about what we got tonight. As it isn't really a thing, right? It isn't a thing to preserve the heart and hearts, right? It's a way to preserve the matic left, right? You're believing in not something strong, but the weakest of the weak, right? It will get better. It will get more sound over time when you start figuring things out. And when you figure things out, it's the heart that holds you together. It's the mindset that holds you together, not just the strength. It is a human being living on earth. And it does tell you that, just because you are forgiven by God, or just forgiven some person, doesn't mean you'll find acceptance always, right? But you will find acceptance when you ask for forgiveness or acceptance between humans altogether. You find a way to find land, find people to find it. So thank you.